Boom, what's up everyone? Welcome to Simulation. I'm your host, Alan Sakyan. Super excited to be talking about human AI hybrid collaboration. We have an epic group joining us today. I'm super excited. We're going to be talking about building tools, maximizing humanity's collective and individual capabilities, saving us vast amounts of cognitive labor, extending our memory in all areas of life. Super pumped to have joining us on the show. We have Jacob Cole, who is the co-founder and CEO of IdeaFlow and a former MIT collective intelligence researcher. Then next we have Monty Kosma. He is a physicist, an ex-lawyer, management consultant, and polymath. And lastly, we have Jack Boffa, who is a Stanford grad in computer science and anthropology and an entrepreneur. Super excited that we are going to have us talking with 4 people at the table in simulation. I'm jacked. This is super fun. Thanks for joining us on the show, everyone. Pumped.
Excellent. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to be here.
Let's do this.
So, Jack, you mentioned that a book on physics that really was accessible to you earlier. What was it called again?
Yeah, it was really interesting. And I have to remember the name because I just think of it as the quantum book, but it's Quantum Mechanics, the Theoretical Minimum. And it's by Leonard Susskind, Stanford professor.
Wow, and so you think this really made physics, like, it explained complex physics in a way that you understood and appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, quantum mechanics is just a very difficult to grasp field. So this was like the first book I had read that actually explained it to someone, at least with exactly the amount of knowledge I had, which was like very basic mathematical knowledge and pretty much nothing else. So yeah, it was perfect for that audience, I thought. Yeah, and it worked really well for that.
What was the name one more time?
It was Quantum Mechanics, the Theoretical Minimum.
One sec. Quantum Mechanics, the Theoretical Minimum. # book. Leonard Susskind, new line, relates to Jack Boffa. Thanks.
Sure.
I'll show you guys what I just did.
Yeah, what'd you do?
Yeah, I'm pumped to share this.
Yeah.
This
So
is
I
exciting.
just wrote down these notes in my thought stream. And
There you go.
And we're going to have a focus happen. Yeah, there we go.
At some point.
And what is a thought stream?
a thought stream is a giant text file historically, where I write all of my notes.
Put it even more central.
It's
there
going
you
to
go.
focus
Yeah,
on the center thing, probably.
Even more? Yeah, like right there. And now just hold it. Yeah, like that. There you go.
Oh, yes.
Okay, cool. And now teach us about this thought stream.
Yeah, so a thought stream is how I've been keeping my notes for many years now, and I've been building progressively better tools to make it easier to do this. This is the latest iteration, but I just prepend new notes at the top whenever I have them and write them down. And then if I ever want to find them again, though, I need a hashtag. So I add a #book, and I can see by clicking on that a list of all the books I've ever written down. And secondly, I connect these things to various people, such as to Monty. Monty loves Werner Vinge, and especially the book of Deepness in the Sky. So I connected that. If I clicked on Monty Kosma, you can see all the dirt I have on Monty Kosma, which is not a lot of dirt actually in that case. But in other cases, I have
I deleted a bunch earlier.
Exactly. I guess relevant to the conversation at hand today, I've got one cool example here, which is Augmenting Human Cognition. This is a book by Doug Engelbart. By the way, Doug Engelbart. Anyone heard the name Doug Engelbart in this room?
I've heard it.
Have you heard the name Doug Engelbart?
Not sure.
Have you heard the name Doug Engelbart?
No.
So Doug Engelbart is by the way, can we focus this again now?
Yeah,
On camera.
Yeah,
There you go.
you're pretty close. There you go. Yeah, you're closer.
Okay.
So maybe even prior to Doug Engelbart, I think it's important to talk about this. All right.
I'd say try to put it over his face, since that's what it's going to be.
You want to
focus on,
and
probably.
if you can bring it even closer to the camera and then put it in the center of the screen.
Oh,
but
one sec.
yes,
Yes, I'm listening to you, Alan.
But okay, let's for a moment. Just for a moment, because
Yeah.
I think this is really important to begin unpacking, because your boy over here is using Evernote, and your boy's got 3,000 notes that he's made over the last 5 years. Okay, so it's just this interesting little universal synergy that Alex K. Chen drops you so gently into my life. And now this man by the name of Jacob Cole is like, oh, I have this epic note-taking thought stream device and way of cataloging all of this information in ways that are extremely able to query later, and this is awesome. So, all right, teach us about this, because this is obviously really interesting and it's really applicable to people that love to take notes.
Yeah, so very, very, very high level comment. I think like Ted Nelson said it best. Ted Nelson is most famously as the inventor of the hyperlink. And he had a very, very cool vision, which still hasn't been built yet. But he said that much of his life is tied up in manuscript handling, roughly, something like that. And
Yep.
he hates categories. Like, he hates having to stick notes in a single category because that's not how things are. That's not how things are in his brain. It's just like a constraint of the physical world. And he's like, you know, suddenly we've got computers, yet why does the software that we use on computers look like paper? It's like, and with all the constraints and limitations of paper. Instead, it should be much closer to how our mind is. In my mind, things have many categories. Things are deeply intertwined, another famous Ted Nelson line.
Yeah. Intertwined.
I want to intertwingle things in the external world like I do in my mind, because otherwise I won't remember how things are intertwined a little while after. And secondly, a benefit of externalizing my cognition is it can become shared cognition, and I can really remember things I never knew if I share my brain with
Okay, I can externalize my cognition, and then I can make my cognition collective cognition. We can then boost. Okay, now I'll do my little quick big history.
Okay.
Okay.
Teach us.
Humans have now this incredible gift of life on this rock orbiting the star, and we have built civilization on this idea of collective learning over time.
That is an epic technology that made humans take off.
Yes, yes. And so this, what you said earlier about spending so much time handling manuscripts is hilarious to me, because I do that. And it is time for us to find the technical solution for us to be able to get this cognition, externalize it, and then make it very easy for us to collectively collaborate, especially as a lot of the things that we aim to discuss are at this edge of knowledge. And so if we want to collectively push the boundaries at the edge of knowledge, we need the right tool to be able to push us out.
Yes.
Most effectively.
Yeah, and just as a quick side comment, as you say that, what pops into my head is something I've always wanted, which is, did you ever play a video game that had like a fog of war or a dark area on the edge of the map?
Totally.
And it's like, I remember the first time I played StarCraft, I was pretty young, but my hands were sweating so much that I had to put a tissue over the mouse, or rather, it was my uncle's mouse, and my uncle was like, yo, don't sweat all over my mouse.
And luckily there were tissues nearby, because we keep tissues by our computers for all different types of reasons.
Indeed. And so anyway, I always have been enchanted by this idea of exploring world maps. And like the world maps that are darkened have this very enchanting feel of it. And what I feel oftentimes separated from is the great mystery of things, especially in civilization. Like, it's something I'm reminded of when I'm in like a small cabin in a huge rainstorm. That's when I start to sense, oh man, this is like, we're just a tiny thing in this vast universe, and I really feel it then.
Or looking up at the stars in a place that doesn't have light pollution, and you're just looking up and there's so many stars and so many planets orbiting those stars, and potentially so much life living on those. So exciting.
Yeah, and so that sense of wonder like escapes me sometimes, and it bothers me that I don't have like external aids that will help me remember. That's a different topic. Remembering stuff on demand and ingraining stuff, but that's like,
you're making the external aids right now.
Yes, and I think there's like a much deeper rabbit hole to be got into, and how far we can go with that. But My point was, let's see, what was the thing exactly?
You were
before?
feeling kind of like dwarfed by the ego in
I
your
was gonna go for
cabin.
it. What was the immediate previous thing?
Prior to cabin, the collective intelligence and pushing the edge of knowledge.
Yes, pushing the edge of knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay, so I also feel that way. I also felt that same type of awe when I first played StarCraft and had the fog of war filled world map. And
which are areas, for those that don't know, that haven't played games that have fog of war. Fog of war is an area on a map where once you spawn, you cannot see that area on a mini map. So you can only see the area that you've ran around. And then you have to run into those areas on the map in order to reveal the fog of war and be able to start seeing that area on the mini map.
yeah, fog of war is a weird term. It just means parts of the map that you can't see. But in the beginning, it's very small because most of your map's not explored. And then it's like, so you really get that cabin feeling again of like, you're in the vast darkness.
This is making me want like Google Maps to implement fog of war. I think that would be really interesting and completely useless, but
Google has implemented fog of war.
This is our new revolutionary feature, right alongside Google Now.
It would actually make us potentially collectively explore new areas.
Yeah.
It would be a really good motivation to do that.
Yeah, and it's like when you haven't updated an area, like you'd see which areas like really haven't been updated in a long time, and you're like, oh dang, there could be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be interesting to see it just in terms of like my own history. Like if I had
that would be
the
great.
data on everywhere I've ever been with an IP connection, an IP address at least, right? It could show me where have I been and how frequently.
Yeah, heat
and,
maps.
and then show me all the places that I've never been. I mean, I kind of know that I've never been to Sri Lanka, but like, you know, some of them are obvious.
Yeah, and it's
but
not
actually,
that you have missed this little area of San Francisco, right?
well, it's like the mapping I want to do
yeah.
in the intellectual mapping we were talking about earlier about books, right? I want to know what are all the books that you've read, what are all the books on your shelf that you want to read, and I want to map that against mine because that gives us connection points, right? You could do that with maps. If I had a map of everywhere I've been and I overlaid my map with yours, I would know that you've never been to Burning Man, right? Or maybe you've been by, but maybe, you know, I don't know when you've been there, right?
Oh, that
So,
would be really
you know,
interesting with like points in common that people had. If
Right,
you did like an
yeah,
and
no,
on the map
yeah.
versus an or,
Right.
both would be revealing.
Oh man,
'cause,
that's so
like,
interesting. So what you're saying, Monty, is that like, okay, but this is a beautiful idea, Monty. Oh my God, that's so cool.
Does this relate to your initial point on the fog of war?
It's gonna all loop back. But I'm not even looping it back right now. But I don't even have to loop it back for this to be awesome because Monty's made such a good point.
Yes.
Which is,
on the knowledge area.
yo, this is so cool. When Monty looks at Alan's bookshelf, what he sees is the intellectual territory Alan has covered and has a million things that he could talk to him about. Like, who is the guy that you had mentioned you saw?
Peter Zion, right?
Peter Zion, yeah.
Yeah, and geopolitics, right?
Shout out to our geopolitician.
Fellow Texan.
Yeah.
Fellow Texan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you can see like this overlapping, what this is fundamentally is seeing this overlapping point on your intellectual map, and that's what the books show. And you know what's also interesting is showing up at someone's house and you realize you know none of the books, but it's like very fascinating to see that little world they've constructed themselves in. Actually,
had some
Okay, and so this is like
going into their house, and
Right.
and then it was unrevealed.
and then it was unrevealed.
Yeah.
right now the killer application
Yes.
of this technology, of course, is dating. I want to know. I mean, seriously, the first I have very limited dating experience, but I got divorced after being married for like 20, almost 30 years, and I really latched onto this great girl. Actually, I had lunch with her today, only because of the books on her shelf. Like she had Richard Posner's Economic Analysis of Law, and she had Carnes Lord's translation of Aristotle's Politics, and it was like, who has these books? Like. Completely out of nowhere. It's no girl in San Francisco has those books on their shelf. You have to go to Texas to find a girl with those kinds of tastes usually. Anyway, but that's the kind of thing. If you could actually like find out just what a person's curious about and look for those connection points. I mean, that's where like the rich intellectual life, rich friendships, all that stuff, in my mind at least.
And
maybe it's in my weird life, but that's where it comes in.
Simultaneously being a little bit careful too, because if we do too much of that, we can find ourselves in echo chambers at times.
yeah.
So there's
Well, right. You don't want too much overlap, right? Because like you want to be with
Perfect
friends
amount.
like that, teach you new things, that bring new things into your life. I mean, you know, it's cool that we've both read Peter Zion, but like you guys haven't, and we can talk all about, we talk all night about geopolitics and the energy industry and how the transformation of the world is going to happen in the next 5, 10 years.
So these are these interesting examples of this fog of war. So
And actually, just real quick, because we're on like such a relevant topic, you got to see what's on my screen right now, guys. Okay, so check this out. Check this out. All right.
Again, angle it, yep, like that, and then bring it close to the center of the camera. As close to the center. Keep going towards the camera. Towards the camera. There, yep, almost there. Keep
invert controls. Oh.
All right, yep. Now
So just call me Engelbart because I angle things. But anyway, here's Doug Engelbart, and I'm gonna hit jump like kind of like Slack except for my brain, and you can see the book Augmenting Human Cognition. And now I click on Doug Engelbart. This is a book that I highly enjoy.
Keep it in the center.
Yep, and then I click
more in the center.
More center. Okay, and I click on Doug Engelbart, and now you can see that he's connected to a bunch of stuff. And he's connected to the mouse. He was the inventor of the mouse. And he's connected to the 5-button Engelbart keyboard, which is a much better communication, computer input device. But let's click on the mouse. The mouse was also connected to IDEO. IDEO is connected to my friend I-Cheng and also this guy, Gavin McDermott, who apparently has found his life passion in a deep way. And I'm supposed to #meet at some point. He's connected to Will Papper. But then I-Cheng is connected to Jacob. And Jacob is connected to all these different people.
And this shows the interconnectedness of everything.
Yes, and so this is
the way that you're actually tagging it to be able to query and parse. And this is very important for your own knowledge graph, and then for others to be able to come in and chime in. Now, does Alan get access to Jacob's knowledge graph?
The short answer is when I want it to happen. Like if I said @Alan on one of my things, it would give me the option to share it with Alan.
Cool. So then I can participate in your knowledge graph.
Exactly.
I can join you at your edge of knowledge where you're pushing research. But potentially, if we want to open source that to everyone, we can also open source it.
Exactly.
Make it private.
Exactly. So you need to have this multi-tiered privacy thing. So you could have maybe a public one. You got one for various groups you're in, and then you've got just your private one. And what's cool is that everyone has sort of a unique set of data in private organizations they're part of. So everyone's confluence of these knowledge graphs, maybe over time and space, is actually different. So even if they themselves aren't any smarter than someone else or aren't any more clever than someone else, this just really makes visual how our different life experiences enable this creativity. Looping this back a couple of steps to the whole fog of war thing and the intellectual map that hasn't been covered.
And that civilization has been slowly expanding over the time that we've been here. Now we get to leverage these tools, these human AI hybrid tools that can help us with this collective learning and push it faster and further.
I guess yes to all points, and in true improv style. Yes, and
right.
The thing that gives me, that I was starting out to say at the very beginning of this, that I said I always wanted, is a video game where I could go online and explore the world map. But this world map was not a map of land and places that were made up, but it was instead a web of interconnected ideas that were laid out on a 2D map.
Me
and
too.
You could walk around this world.
It's so interesting that this is happening right now. I've had this vision, and I'm happy that you're sharing this.
And as a meta comment about these visions, it's so great that we're connecting now. It would have been great if we connected long ago. And there's probably 10 more people who have had the same vision, and they are feeling intellectually lonely right now somewhere. And it's only by ad hoc, random coincidences, chance introductions, and asystematic things that this happens. We're living in the Wild West, Alan. We're living in the Wild West. Things only happen by chaos. And this is why so many people have existential crises about doing things like making college decisions, because they're like, oh dang, if I make this college decision, I don't know all the implications of what's going to happen. And it's going to literally be all these people that I met. I can't tell if it's for better or for worse, and the worst things can become good and stuff like that. And it's largely because of these serendipitous connections between people and between ideas. And so if there were systems that were in place in the world that systematically connected all the people that really should be connected, I would be so much less worried about this. And there's so many industries that would be absolutely like ended if like recruiting as an industry, like matching people to the right projects to be working on is one such thing. Matching co-founders to each other, perhaps dating, all these things would be like dramatically solved if you could have a really good connector, a really good super connector, like Alex K. Chen, except scaled massively.
Do you think that having like a sort of, I guess it's a hybrid knowledge map system, but integrated between the way people map knowledge to form connections is kind of what I'm imagining here. Do you think that would actually go to like reduce the sort of chaotic nature of the world that you were describing with like, what will the consequences of my actions be? Do you think it would have that result, or mainly just like foster connections that you might not have made otherwise, or?
There's two comments there.
Yeah.
So when talking about creative noise is an idea that I really like. It's just like, okay, throwing ideas together, maybe throwing like I love staring at clouds and drawing what I see because I can trace a lot better than I can draw. And if I like see a cloud, I can trace or take a photo of a cloud or something. I can trace all kinds of way more impressive pictures in that cloud than I can draw from scratch.
Yeah.
And in general, come up with more creative ideas. And this is just like a noise generator, pretty much. But in that case, you want to have some chaos. And then on the other end, it's just like, okay, meeting intellectual soulmates. It's like you meet someone and you're like, oh dang, where were you the last 6 years? And that's something you want to.
That's how I feel about you right now.
Yes, exactly. It's like, where were you the last 6 years? And it's like the world's productivity would be so much better, I think, if you just like got all those people together. And that's something you super want to decrease the chaos of. And like, sure, there's going to be serendipitous connections that were missed, but it's at least, you know, I probably got 5 out of the top 10 people I should be meeting in the world, even if I live in Macedonia and never left my hometown.
I like how you use the words super connector, and I like how you also make it super clear that there is so much potential for us to be able to push the edge of knowledge in ways that have yet to be discovered because we haven't applied the right human AI hybrid collaboration tools yet. And that is kind of, this is what we are unpacking and what you're building. And as I simultaneously think about what you said earlier, where you can go to Google Earth and you can see the beautiful blue and green marble, and it's amazing that we've mapped that. But why haven't we mapped civilization's knowledge? Wikipedia is close in some ways, but again, it's about visualization, and a lot of it is, and for me at least, for depends on the way that the person learns in some regards. And again, visualization being on a 2D surface versus the visualization being in a spatial 3D.
Yeah.
And that's how you can really start moving. Go ahead, yes.
I have a friend's project that you might just freak out when you see right now. Do you want to freak out right now?
The one
on screen. It's not even my project. Like you want to see, you go on your computer right now to wiki.polyframe and
wiki.polyframe
and then it's a .me domain, so polyfray.me.
Oh, polyfray.
Polyfray.me. So
F-R-A-Y?
No. Just
F-R-A.
dot. Right now. .me.
Oh, okay.
Boom.
Oh, got it.
This is called Wiki Galaxy. This is a friend of mine.
Wiki Galaxy.
You're going to freak out, Alan.
100,000 Wikipedia articles, 500 thematic nebulas in one galaxy.
Yeah.
It's not even Wiki Planet, it's Wiki Galaxy.
Oh, interesting.
It's beyond.
Interesting. Oh my God, what's about to happen? What's about to happen? Oh, there's a launch button.
Yeah, nothing's gonna happen.
It's a launch. Of course, a spaceship. You need a spaceship to go in the galaxy. Right? So, if you start zooming in, this is Wikipedia, and it's zoomed out.
Click an article.
3D.
Welcome. Let's go over here and read this first. Welcome. Wiki Galaxy is a 3D web experiment that visualizes Wikipedia as a galactic web of information. How do you know these humans? With it, I aim to show the world the beauty and variety of knowledge that is available at our fingertips. I use 100,000 of 2014's most popular articles, all clustered with hyperlinks. In this world, Wikipedia articles are stars. Oh, yes. interests are nebulas, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. And you are on a journey through knowledge. Whoa! Who's this human?
His name is Owen.
Shout out.
He works at IBM Last Day Checked. IBM Research.
Shout out.
Yeah. But this is a side project. This is a side project for like years and years in college and stuff.
So
But wait, look, no,
okay,
click on a node, click on the
so
nebula.
Click on what?
Anything. Just watch it zoom, and you could just scroll in with your scroll wheel.
Oh, wow.
Oh my goodness.
It's a
That
3D
is so
graph visualization, and it actually runs pretty fast when you're not live streaming, I think.
Yeah. Whoa.
So click on some stuff, and you'll explore some webs. Like, let's zoom in. It's going to get way cooler when you click on some nodes.
Okay, let's go north and oh my goodness.
Wow.
This is
And you can even do fly-through mode with the arrow keys if you turn that on.
interesting.
So you can just scroll around right now.
Northumberland
Yeah.
County.
And then you can see what it's connected to on the right-hand side, I think. And click on one of those things like,
On the
I
right.
love want or something. Look on that right-hand
Oh,
panel.
on the right, yeah, okay. Onto which one?
Just any of them. I love white. Yeah, you could see that. I know some people.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, just you can click on any of those things.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, and then, so interesting. So this is what it's like when you go onto Wikipedia and when you click on that first item and you're looking at a meaning, and then you realize, oh, I love white, cool, and then you click on that one.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
right now we're doing it in a spatial
Yeah.
plane, in a three-dimensional plane.
We've also eliminated a lot of information. You've eliminated
Totally.
essentially all the in-between words
Well,
and
there's also
ideas,
the article
and you've got the
itself.
links.
Right.
But that's what, like, from one point of view, that's kind of what you care about. Like, well, which ideas link to each other, and it's a different process. It's a different kind of engagement when you're looking for connections between things.
It's a bit of like a trade of breadth for depth, kind of.
Yeah.
You're instead of exploring one topic.
It's just like
deeply,
search. Like
you're-
search. Like our whole world has been taken over by Google over the last couple of decades. Well, but the point of Google and anything like it is it's all very search based. But search is not something that it's very useful for one type of research or engagement activity. But like there's a lot of times when it's not. I mean, if I have one of the problems I spent a lot of years of my life attacking is how do we categorize information? So I've got a wealth of information. How do I actually put it into groups that are sensible for my particular purpose, and then make decisions on those groups rather than having to look at 1,000,000 items? Can I look at 1,000 items that have been grouped effectively? Right? Those are very, very powerful problems or powerful tools for solving massive problems of organizing information. And you know what? Search is completely irrelevant. Maybe not completely, but it's about 99% irrelevant to solving those kinds of problems.
Yeah, there's this entire.
But nobody invests in that. I mean, everyone's investing in search, and then how do you sell advertising to people against that? Which we've solved that.
See, we identify a super powerful potential in a technology, and then we identify what tangented us away from building out what we actually would have really liked to see it. And then what we can do is say, hey, how do we prevent ourselves from going on that tangent as we build out the next version? So how can we bake in these wisdoms, what we care about into what we build, so that way we don't have these models that are all messed up with the advertising attention economy that is ruining our desire to actually find these and upgrade these tools.
Yes, but I mean, as just an aside, I mean, the attention-based advertising economy pays for all these amazing tools that we get to just use for free. That's how much value is created just by the fact that we have a Google search engine or a Gmail, email application or Bing for that matter, right? I mean, whatever it is. I heard somebody use Bing as a verb the other day. I don't know what that was about. But, It was a politician.
Oh man, I've got 3 sparks off what you just said.
Yeah, go ahead.
The first one,
You just introduced me to this, though.
it's freaking amazing.
It's so amazing.
Yeah.
It's too complex. My first reaction is it's too complex. Actually, search is one-dimensional. You get a list of results and you look through the list. And
Some people like this complex, though, to start.
it's not as useful. 2 dimensions is way more useful for our brains to comprehend, depending on what you're trying to do. Depending on what you're trying to do. But imagine if you could do a search and you could actually have it organized instead of just a linear list of results, if those results were grouped, like, okay, well, here's a category where, like, if I search for baseball, well, here's all the stuff around the history of the game baseball. Here's results that are around, shopping for baseball-related products. Here's, baseball cards, which is its own thing. Here's a group which is, baseball used as a metaphor for, sexual engagement, right? Or whatever, like, you've got any million, lots, right? So there's so many different, baseball can have, I'm sure there's many, many other, meanings that we can come up with.
Yeah, so now you're pointing out that we can still gain something from a two-dimensional interaction with the search that can categorize the information and display it to us and visualize it in ways that are completely novel that have yet to be explored, because it's just every time you run a search, it's just like bat, 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 and that's all that's.
Yeah, they have been explored. It's just that it's never been commercialized.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
the
I would
company
definitely.
I worked with, Attenex, ATTENEX. Don't know that they exist anymore. They were.
There's a whole pile of freaking awesome technical companies and tools that that died, and we need to resurrect them.
Interesting that we're doing stuff.
Well, we were doing this in the context of law. So, like, in one of my previous lives, I ran Procter & Gamble's acquisition of Gillette, like big $52 billion acquisition, and
52 with the B.
with a B, yeah, I do some big projects.
With a B.
With a B.
Holy, that's a big.
If you ever need fundraising with a B, come to me. Sure. It's the funny.
Procter & Gamble's.
But yeah, so Procter & Gamble's acquisition of Gillette. Right. Okay. And so we had to deal with, as at the time doing antitrust competition law, and we had to deal with the regulators in DC and around the world who wanted to figure out what is the effect of combining these businesses, because a couple of businesses, so they both, Procter & Gamble and Gillette were both in deodorants, and they were both in dental care, because one owned Crest and one owned Oral-B, right? So you have to figure out, okay, well, what's going to be the impact on competition in all these markets all around the world? And so the process involves gathering, because the government has the power to compel this, to do their investigation. They want every document from these companies that relates to competition. And like, okay, well, like, how much is this? Well, it turns out that, and I'm sure the numbers have scaled up since then, but at the time, the cost for each person's who documents that you want to get, their email, their paper documents, everything, just to get the email and the documents off their computer and look at them, cost about between $50,000 and $70,000 per person, and the government wants to look at documents from 200 to 300 people.
Wow.
In a case like that, so massive costs. And so one of the things I did was I actually designed, kind of engineered a process around this, and then built technology into the process. And what we did was this technology. We had this brilliant engineer. He actually is teaching this stuff up in Seattle now, Skip Walter. Took some technology out of Battelle National Labs, which had developed some of this stuff for, spy type stuff, looking at intel, that would take a document, whatever it was, figure out which words, it would grammatically parse it, figure out which words are used as nouns. And then all the words that look like they're nouns, we would treat those as a concept. And then we would use those concepts to create like a fingerprint and organize documents into clusters and put them all on a two-dimensional like spiderweb graph. It's amazing, and it looks an awful lot like what you're developing.
That's a very similar
in
application.
IdeaFlow.
Yeah.
Wait, what's it called?
It was called Attenex.
Okay, I remember you mentioned this to me.
And I'm not sure that it's even ATTENEX. Yeah, they were acquired by FTI Consulting here in the Bay Area, and like all big consulting firms, I don't think they effectively took that technology forward. It was a sad story.
By the way, I'm writing this down in my thought stream.
Back to thought stream.
Yeah, real quick. I've got like several sparks on the things that you just said.
So many
sparks.
So Attenex, hashtag related company. Then I hit angle brackets Monty Kosma, and
put down Skip Walter, because you need to meet Skip.
Skip Walter, and I'm going to say hashtag meet.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And wait, is he like the founder of the company?
He was one of the co-founders. Yeah.
I see. Cool. Awesome. So
that's how you can do what? So explain to people what you just did.
all right. So what I just did, guys, is I have a very small brain. So if we can put this here, I have a very, very small brain. And I meet a lot of people, and I want to help them, or like
we all have very small brains. Yeah.
But mine is extra small at this point. And so what I just did is 10x hashtag related company, meaning it's a company relating to my company. And actually I've got another tag hashtag related project, which doesn't even restrict itself to companies, but I just connected it with angle brackets, which is this new symbol that it means relates to. That's how you read it. It's like relates to Monty Kosma, relates to Skip Walter, and it creates a backlink as well. So if I now click on Monty Kosma, you can see that Monty Kosma is connected to a deepness in the sky and to a 10x. And the fact that there's a backlink there is super nice, because that means if I ever go to Monty Kosma, I can see this note, even though that note was many pages ago in my thought stream.
And so thought stream, now teach us a little bit about this. So thought stream is one aspect of idea flow.
Yeah, so thought streaming, I would say, is something that is just a way of taking notes. It doesn't really matter what tools you're using. You can pull out a text file, you can do it on paper. It just means not worrying about categorization first. Like the issue that I have with Evernote is I've got to think about where I'm going to put something generally. And there are ways around this by using tagging, but I'm unsatisfied by them because what I really want to do is just dump all my notes as lowest friction medium possible onto a piece of paper.
Likewise.
And then add a few tags really quickly. And that workflow is just practically impossible with Evernote.
Yeah, I'd almost separate it from note-taking even as a concept, because
very important.
My uses for Evernote would be almost disjoint with my uses for a tool like this, because there are certain cases where categories make a lot of sense, like if I'm taking notes for a lecture or a class or something, I want to say, here's the class.
Exactly.
Or like notes for a project, but maybe even within a project, we were talking about this at one point, and you mentioned friction being like a big point, because if I'm taking notes, or I have a note for like a project or something that I want to remember for a certain purpose, I don't want to have to fumble through my Evernote to find like, oh, well, where was this project in my notebook? Or did I write about this project in some unrelated notebook or something like that?
Yes, you don't want to know, the notebooks are so irrelevant to finding the information. You just want to find the information in one.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I would always just anytime that I wanted to just jot down stuff, I feel like this would be a good medium for that, as almost separated from note-taking as a concept.
Yes. So note-taking, so by the way, I'm an obsessive keeper of lists of ideas and quotes and books and people I meet, but I do not take a lot of notes in class. I just try to understand and pay attention to the lecture and maybe jot down a few scribbles for the class. And
you want to parse for the key takeaways and write those down.
Yeah, and it's not, and it's really a very separate problem. And Evernote and OneNote and stuff can do a great job at those things, and I don't want to try to replace them. I think they do it fine, and even paper notebooks are pretty fine for that. The only downside, I love sharing my notes. If I do take good notes on something, I'm like, as long as I put so much effort in this, I might as well go share it with some people and help them. And that's the one reason to take digital notes. I'm also obsessed with creating class wikis, and either I do this on a Google Sites or just a Google document map to a reasonable domain name. And for a bunch of classes I took at MIT and stuff, I just would make a Google site that had all my notes, and other people can add to it. It felt very satisfying. But I want to actually return to a couple of other points.
The Spark, because I wanted to see.
Sparks. I remember the Sparks. I remember.
I just wanted to see if you wanted to explain the other aspects of idea flow to people. Do you want to?
I very much do.
Okay, do you want to later then?
I want to catch these 3 sparks, and then I'll show the point of where, or some of the point at least, as much as I can get by. Okay, spark 1. So Monty made a super relevant point a moment ago. Which was you can just take all the nouns or named entities in a document and extract them, and this creates an almost unique fingerprint for this document.
Yes.
And one of the profound ideas I picked up from studying a bit of category theory
which was costing an obscene amount of money, you were indicating, by the way. And we can bring that cost down. Yeah, that's huge. Yeah.
Yes, and I'm going to get to that as well. So the first thing is just idea from category theory in math, which is this somewhat obscure branch of meta-mathematics that is more popular in the UK and Europe than in the US, but it's basically the mathematics of figuring out when different mathematical disciplines are actually the same mathematical discipline in some finding correspondences between these disciplines so that you can apply the learning from one discipline to another discipline. And when you discover that like one concept is isomorphic and maps directly onto a concept in another discipline, you're like, okay, well, wait a second, I can apply these other theorems that I learned in the first discipline. But one of the principles of this is things are defined not by their names fundamentally, but what they are related to, like the topology that they exist in the nature of those relationships. Not just the topology, but also the types of the nature of the relationships. But even if you just look at the topology of, say, like this applies to all kinds of things that aren't mathematical theorems, like in...
Oh, it totally relates. I have an example. I was on a flight here, and in fact, it was right after we spoke a couple of days ago. I was flying here from Texas, and I was sitting there on the plane, screwing around with ThoughtStream, right? And I just was like stream of consciousness ideas, and I had been reading a book about the history of TCP/IP, and you know the sawtooth and buffer bloat, like the problem of buffer bloat, and it hit me. Buffer bloat is what I am suffering, and what I think almost every human is suffering with their email. And
Explain this.
there's some explanation to it, but the point was, this was the perfect example of what you were just saying. There's these concepts of acknowledgement and exponential fall off and buffer bloat, and how do you solve that? The problem where buffer bloat came from. So if you have a router, and you've got incoming traffic because you're browsing the web or whatever, and if you're sending up a large file, and then you're continuing to browse, you're sending the file in the background. What happens, or if you have multiple users on a network doing this, what happens is, okay, it's funny because it's all driven by economics. Memory got really cheap. And like you can't buy a memory stick that's like less than a gigabyte. And so if you're Cisco and you're building a router, you want to just put a little memory in there for a buffer, well, you stick in a gigabyte. Okay, so if you got a gigabyte buffer, because that's the smallest, cheapest memory you can put in, well, your router is going to just stack up all this traffic. And if it can't get it out, right, because you're doing some giant file send, that's fine. But it interacts in a very negative way with my web browsing that I'm trying to do. Because what happens is I ask for a page, and when I get the data, I send a packet back, acknowledgement. It's tiny, just an acknowledgement that I got it. But if that acknowledged packet going back out is behind all this other data transmission that's in the way, it looks like my acknowledgement is coming really slow. And what happens? Well, if my acknowledgement is slow to go, the transmitting end, which is doing this TCP/IP sawtooth thing, it backs off. The way it does it is it increases, if it's getting an acknowledgement packet coming in quickly, it increases the transmit speed, and if it doesn't get the acknowledgement, it cuts the speed in half. So speed increase, 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 drop, increase, 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 drop. And what happens is, because of memory getting cheap, which is like a completely unrelated thing, this pattern that happened is that people trying to communicate are being slowed down absolutely unnecessarily. And what hit me is this same exact pattern. It happens when we're trying to email each other. Because I got a giant, buffer. I can hold how many gigabytes, whatever, for free with my Gmail. So I have an infinite number of emails. And and I only look at what's on that first screen, and if it's not just like my search hits, I don't often go to screen 2 to figure out what did I miss last week or yesterday or 5 hours ago, depending on what my my rate of flow is. Right? So the cool thing about what Jacob is saying is that, imagine that. So there's this mesh of interconnected ideas in the realm of, network engineering, and there's a very similar network of meshed interconnected ideas that maps almost identically in the realm of human communication. And I don't know why it hit me, maybe because I know a little bit about both and I was reading something and I was suffering my own buffer bloat. I don't know, this is where a lot of human creativity and innovation actually happens. I don't know if we want to automate it or if we can, but having tools that can help like prompt us with ideas. I mean, what do you do? How do you think about that? Because that's the idea you're talking about, is these related patterns, right?
Yeah, actually, so let me add another thing, push another thing onto our stack before popping, just because it's going to be, and I wrote down my stack. Also, at some point, we can talk about memory palaces for use in terms internal to a conversation to offload cognitive effort, but I just haven't been writing it down because it's even faster and easier when I can just write it down. But I'm not that good at memory palaces. But important thing here that you just said is something really interesting. So, all right, so I was having a conversation with someone who does materials science research, and she was like, yeah, I was researching this field that I thought was brand new, and my advisor thought was brand new, I think that's what it was. And it was the field of one-dimensional materials. And we barely found any work in it. It's like literally like just chains of atoms connected together. And they didn't find any work, and no one knew about it. It was going, oh, dang, we're onto something really huge here. And like months later, someone was like, have you heard of these things called molecular wires? And molecular wires are just the exact same thing as one-dimensional materials, except there's a huge amount of literature on them. And so the thing is like a human who looks at these two terms, and especially these two terms in context, can kind of see that these are related fields, but it's almost impossible to like come up with these if you don't know the search terms. And just because you don't know the right search terms, like there's one thing that's a lot better than Googling something, which is talking to someone who just thoroughly researched the heck out of the thing and has the map of the whole field and what's missing and what's not there. Just knows, and because they know.
And then they can dynamically adjust to teaching the person.
Yeah, exactly. And they can, not just for teaching, but just for finding the relevant information, because they've mapped the whole space and they know what it is and what it is not. As a result of doing that survey. But I think that like a lot of scientific research could be vastly sped up, and at least a lot of the connection work that I do could be vastly sped up. That I can say for sure.
Me too.
If I even have something like
literally behind you right now, speeding up the connection work. Yeah, that's literally what it is.
Yeah, and it's like even if I have only a layman's understanding of someone's deep field, I can sometimes read, if I just had like a mechanical Turk interface that showed me like two different ways of phrasing things, and it would suggest, hey, are these two related? And I could dig into it with a little bit more effort. I could say maybe with 75% probability these are related or they're not related. Of course, I wouldn't miss the really valuable, really rare connections because I'm not an expert, but an expert looking at it could actually say there's really valuable, really rare connections. But even as a non-expert and avid connector of people, I think I can create a lot of value, I know, just manually. And with a system to augment that connection thing, it would be ridiculous to have that juxtaposition to it.
And, well, so when you were talking about the thing before, with like, if you could have something that would foster these connections, like a person, telling you in person about how this stuff works.
Yeah.
I think of like kind of two branches there. There's almost like the informational mapping branch, which is like a lot of what we've been talking about with, how you connect ideas and stuff. And you need to build up a graph of essentially how all this knowledge connects. And that's kind of what you can do with the, things that like what you were talking about with parsing through documents to pick out individual nouns and then seeing how those relate. But I'm interested also in like how you could connect a sort of almost an artificial intelligence tool to decide for a specific person how you would teach that. And you could almost like integrate these things side by side and then have like, if you were now assuming like a tool that knew or that had all of this knowledge, once you had parsed through it and assembled it into a logical framework, then you could even start thinking about like, how do you have something that teaches this to a person and adapts to the specific ways a person responds to information and responds to like getting told things. And it's just a lot of interesting areas of expansion with that.
Very interestingly enough, part of the conversation I had at dinner earlier with Anand Srinivasan and Amar Sood is they both geeked out about that exact topic area of having like, a human teacher isn't even close to how good a teacher that really knows everything that you know, like a buddy that grew up with you from the womb. Like you've got an AI buddy, knows everything you've learned pretty much, and it could really tailor things to you. Also just, not to go down that rabbit hole, but just to throw out related resources for listeners. If no one's read Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson, it's worth checking out the primer. Have you read Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson? You could pull out your thought stream and write #book. The Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson right now if you want it. #education. #book. Yes.
Do it.
And so I will share that with you after.
Totally.
And it proposes this in extremely beautiful style. And the second thing that's relevant here is to know about just FYI. the previous company, and you can that Juan Bennett, founder of Filecoin, the like $500 million or whatever blockchain company, his previous project was this amazing knowledge mapping tool called Athena, where he showed the dependencies for each thing that you wanted to learn. So if you want to understand a probability density function, you should probably understand a probability mass function first, or something like that. And the idea would be that if you could track the dependencies that someone's mastered, then you can really accelerate a lot of the educational process. And that this isn't just about education, but it's also about essential to teaching machines to solve problems. But actually, let me branch back to one previous point first, but it looks like you had one.
I have a question for you about that. So to do this kind of thing you're talking about, I mean, I know that like the way that you're taking notes in ThoughtStream and so forth, it's, and like the links in Wikipedia, it's just a link. It's just this links to that. But what about the ontology? What about actually defining the way that these objects relate? So like, Jacob is, my friend, Jacob is my campmate. I'm an advisor to Jacob's company, or whatever the various levels of different relationships may be. We have those between ideas. I mean, the coffee cup is sitting on the table. The coffee cup is a container.
Well,
a container that contains.
an idea, just to be between things, but also between ideas. But I wouldn't call coffee cup an idea. Go ahead.
You wouldn't? Okay.
I would not call coffee cup.
It's not necessarily an idea, but I mean, we have ontology. It's just easier to understand an ontology.
Concepts have ontologies, and so really important point here. So labeled relationships are important. Mm-hmm. In the case of my own notes, I find that a good chunk of the time I can get away without doing it. But if you actually want to be proper about things, and my company's goal is to be proper about things longer term, you got to have labeled relationships. And it turns out there's a syntax called Jellish. It's a very obscure thing that they developed for like early semantic web projects that uses these angle brackets. And the only difference is you stick the relationship inside the angle brackets. Like you could say like Joey Ito as some text, and then angle brackets investor of is inside the angle brackets. Then you have idea flow is that kind of situation.
I really liked your formulation of you can get it away without doing it, because that's like when I was thinking about your question of like, do you include these sorts of like tagged relationships versus do you just like say, oh, this thing's related to this thing? For human understanding of the world, the tagged relationship is essential, I feel like, because like coffee cup to table, you need to know like, is the coffee cup on the table? Is the coffee cup below the table? Yeah. These are all like important details. But yeah, then when I was thinking about it and in terms of like, how would I design a tool that like maps out the world and the way things in the world relate, you almost just need to tag them and not really do much more when I think about it. And I was wondering like, how important is it to include those?
So this is a perfect question, but go ahead.
No, yeah, I mean, that's basically it. Is like, I don't actually know when I think about it where you would include that data or like what that data would end up doing, even though it's such an essential part of how humans understand the world.
So man, this is so good. So a few things. Like, you guys are going to see idea flow in a bit. And the question is like, what's the difference between Google's knowledge graph and idea flow? And Google's knowledge graph has like all kinds of stuff and all kinds of facts, and it's really great that it knows them and they're in the background. They can like help you link concepts. But I as a human don't need to see most of those most of the time. And if I actually saw them, I'd be in fact overwhelmed. And so there's a huge difference between what.
Do you actually know if there's a way to browse Google's knowledge graph as like a visualization, or has anyone built this? Do you know?
I feel like there was at one point, and then they shut down their API. And it was terrible.
Sounds like what Google does.
Yeah.
I've heard of them doing that a lot.
It's too bad. I mean, this was developed by Danny Hillis, right? This is we need to get Danny in this room in the conversation.
So what was developed by Danny Hillis? Can you explain, please?
Google's knowledge graph.
It was MetaWeb.
It was MetaWeb. Yeah. Monty, you should explain real quick, and then I really want to get back to that earlier point.
Yeah,
and then I want to add like 7 more things to the stack. We can never finish the conversation.
Yeah, no, well, we're already there. MetaWeb was a project. Danny Hillis, who was the founder of Thinking Machines, one of your MIT
with
friends.
Richard Feynman, right?
Yeah, well, there's a great story that I still have to get the actual story to you between where Richard Feynman completely intellectually destroyed Marvin Minsky over a lunch that happened there, which was hilarious. But anyway,
I can buy that happening.
Yeah. Well, anyway, none of that matters. Danny is brilliant, and he invented the connection machine, which I was their biggest customer back when I was at Lockheed at Skunkworks.
Dane, Lockheed was a customer of the thinking machine.
Yes,
and what was the thinking machine providing Lockheed?
I was using it for. Well, I was part of both. I was part of the AI group, and I was also doing some a lot of operations research, optimization type work, and I was also doing stealth aircraft design. And if I tell you anymore, I have to kill you.
I'm down for that. I think disseminating the knowledge is more important than a little bit of the life there. Okay, can we?
Well, we won the Cold War, so I guess we did something right.
Can we have a moment just to celebrate one thing? I know there's tens of thousands of things on the stack, and et cetera, et cetera. I think it's really important to slow down for a moment, close our eyes, join me. Take a deep breath in, feel your body. Do it again, breathe in loud, and breathe out loud. That's it, just a little bit of that. It's just really calming. We do a lot of intellectualizing, and sometimes we get very powerful people that sit with us and slow us down a lot, and I think that's really important to do in the thinking and stacks. I'm just thinking.
I feel the back of my head and my neck getting longer, and this is so good, and I just feel like I'm unkinking myself and opening the crown of my head to the sky.
Yeah. And just remember how grateful we are and we all must be for the beautiful life that we have here on this planet together, and how we can better collaborate and pay respect to the 100 billion humans that built civilization, all the ubiquity and everything that we have. So paying them respect and being grateful is so beautiful. And building out these next iterations of technologies is very important, pushing the way that we collaborate on pushing the edge of knowledge. So you were talking thinking machine, there's been so many sparks that have been happening. There's still more to unpack about idea flow, so should we go there?
Yeah, you let me very briefly make
yes, please.
2 points, and I'd love to share.
Yes.
The first point is simply that if you took a dictionary and you replaced you substituted each word for a scrambled piece of gibberish, just by looking at the relationships of those pieces of gibberish, we could pretty accurately reconstruct the original dictionary. Even if you screwed up the word order in relationships, you could get away with it. And this reflects that things are defined by what they relate to in a very fundamental way. Yeah. And a related point is that this is really the insight that a lot of the deep learning for natural language processing techniques hinge on, which is the fact that you can just look at a window around a word, like look at what words are near another word and figure out its identity by those relationships. And even if you don't have them labeled, there's a lot of incredible uniqueness based on it. So what is cognition about? What is knowing something really? What is thinking about something? It is having in your head, maybe your heart too, but you have it and you see all the other things it evokes, the other images it evokes, maybe even the bodily sensations or emotions it evokes. And the same thing could be a different thing to different people because they have different relationships to that thing. And other things are pretty often similar, like the number 3, no matter what 3 objects. Actually, 3 is complicated, so let's not do that. But I don't know. What does the concept of meditation practice or yoga evoke for different people? One person might think it's like, oh, it's an exercise class. Another person is like, okay, it's this philosophical system about releasing unnecessarily held tension in my mind and resolving conflict in my mind, and the physical thing is only a tool for it. And in each of these cases, you can summon a web around the concept of yoga for you. You can summon a web, like all the related concepts, and that's its definition to you ultimately. And it's a bunch of images and stuff like that. And what's interesting is when you tell a researcher an idea, it sparks a different web of connections in every researcher, or a problem that you're trying to solve. It sparks a different set of ideas and connections. And it's because we have this diversity of sparks in our brains when you are exposed to an idea that multiple people working on problems can each solve different pieces of the problems. The coolest example of this, by the way, I think is Project Polymath by Tim Gowers, who is a Cambridge professor and Fields medalist. And on his WordPress blog, he started an amazing thing, which is, he's like, yo, let's try to prove these theorems. I don't know how to do it. In the comments section of his WordPress blog, people posted solutions to lemmas and little pieces of it. And together they've proved some things that no one else has previously been able to prove. And I think there's clearly a huge opportunity to make better tools for this than a WordPress blog. And that actually brings me to, I can share what I'm trying to build, if you want to share.
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. Should I grab that laptop or other way?
Absolutely, right? And it is ready for you. Here it comes.
Yeah.
You can turn it right, so
Cool.
it's got so which order again, just in case. Go ahead and start explaining what you're sharing, and then we'll share via the screen as well as we go.
Yeah.
So what are you showing us?
Well,
You're showing us another part of idea flow.
yep. So there's a lot of problems that all really necessitated the creation of the same tool. And one of the first problems that I started out caring about is brainstorming hackathon ideas. And
Brainstorming hackathon ideas.
yeah,
That's cool. There's tons of awesome ways to permutations for that.
yeah. And so I started out with a Google document, hackathonprojects.jacobcole.net. It's collaborative. You can post your hackathon ideas if you want to share them or comment on others. By the way,
Should I share your screen?
yes,
Not
please.
yet.
Yes,
Okay,
share.
yes,
Yep.
okay, All right.
Yeah, so looking at my screen here, this is the map of hackathon ideas. And so how did this start?
And so now this is, you explained to us thought stream earlier.
Thought streaming is a paradigm of taking notes.
It's a paradigm of taking
Yes.
notes. So that's thought stream. Now what are we being shown now?
What we're being shown. So, by the way, just quick thing to avoid confusion. Thought streaming is just a paradigm of taking notes. It's not like the name of our company or anything like that.
It's a part of idea flow. Is
It is
thought
just
stream?
It's thought. So,
Okay.
no,
Okay, please explain.
let's not spend too much time on this.
Okay.
But
Okay. Okay.
thought streaming is just my name for how I take notes, and it doesn't
Okay, cool.
relate to a tool or anything. But you can build better tools for thought streaming. Anyone could build this.
Got it. I like that. I like calling it thought stream. That's cool.
Yeah, so ThoughtStreaming is it. Yeah. And then IdeaFlow is my company, and we build tools. One of the tools is a tool for thought streaming, and it all interlinks with our general graph creation and information manipulation engine, which has a use case that I think can illustrate something kind of pretty in front of us, which is about brainstorming ideas for hackathons. And so
this looks a lot like the galaxy that you're showing us.
It does,
yeah.
Except it's two-dimensional, as Monty pointed out.
Much more usable.
Yes, and it's also you can add to it. That's the important thing.
This is very interesting. I feel as though Monty's bringing this up because I think there's an extremely interesting point there. That there's something about that two-dimensionality and how we can still very easily catalog and parse that I think makes sense, and we can probably endeavor into that field of conversation more. It's interesting the difference between what a three-dimensional versus two-dimensional way of mapping this actually looks like and interacting with it. I like how you keep bringing that up because I'm very interested. Now seeing it finally in play is very cool for me, and I hope for you guys that are watching this as well. By the way, we really appreciate you all tuning in and enjoying this. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, by the way. Do join us in the comments. Start talking about cool things like this hybrid human AI collective intelligence. Yes, I know you were going to be showing, yes.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, no, I had a quick idea on the two-dimensional thing, which was a two-dimensional map. You have the most space to display things and the most ways in which different things can connect. Because in one-dimensional, a thing can only connect to the next thing or the previous thing in a list.
Exactly.
In 2D, things can connect to an arbitrary number of things through the sides, but you solve the problem that you have in 3D of things getting in the way of each other.
That's what I feel Monty is.
I think that was probably exactly your gripe with the galaxy, was like, you just have all this stuff in front of you, and since our vision is two-dimensional, you end up seeing it as 2D anyway, but you're just missing most of the information.
I mean, if I'm going to organize data in 3 dimensions, I have to be in like a virtual reality, like my HTC Vive, where I can walk around the room and look around things, because I can't deal with it on a 2D screen.
This is the problem.
And I don't want to. I mean, honestly, like,
it's I'm finding this so fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, there's
a really interesting
there's a whole lot about human cognition and perception, and like if what you're trying to do is convey emotion, I think 3D often, like, think about the difference between watching a play on stage versus watching a film. They're just very different mediums. There's something very human about seeing people on a stage and moving around in front of you. Maybe that relates, maybe not, but
I'm newly obsessed with this subject of like having a three-dimensional like a galaxy on a 2D screen and seeing the things getting in the way of each other. That can be more confusing than potentially having it be 2D.
Right. Yeah.
One of the things, there's a couple of things. One of the things, you can show a multi-dimensional space in 2 dimensions without too much trouble. Because, two dimensions, it's not necessarily just a graph where you've got, price and quantity, a demand curve, right? So it's not necessarily, your 2-dimensional space is not necessarily just an X and a Y axis, right? Like if you look at what you were just showing on Jacob's screen, the idea flow, if you look at idea flow, right? This is hardly
I'm busy taking notes of our conversation, by the way.
This is not organized into 2 dimensions. I mean, each one of these lines, in a sense, is a dimension, or maybe the groups are, right? Like, now it's very hard to make sense of that in some ways. But I mean, actually, here's a controversial, possibly, question for you, Jacob.
Yeah.
Haven't we just all this stuff that we're talking about in 2D organizing? Have we just reinvented mind maps? I mean, that's like a technology and a tool that's been around forever. What's different?
That's a great question. And so, basically, mind maps. So, okay. Firstly, funny personal historical note. I remember being very dismissive of mind maps. Very distinctly remember this. I was in a science fair in high school, and I was doing some like thermodynamics research, blah, 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 blah. And I saw a project that had qualified for the Greater San Diego Science Fair. And it was on like, do mind maps help you remember stuff better than other things? So I'm like, I can't believe that even got into science fair. I can't even believe it was accepted in the science fair to be judged. It's like such a silly project. And it wasn't, like, I don't think it was like a ridiculously well executed project, but it also helped me first, I mean, I just was like totally blind to the fact that, when you have a 2D linking medium, it allows you to fundamentally capture different kinds of things than in a one-dimensional medium. Like you can see how things are connected. That said, mind maps, as they were originally proposed, while they did have links as a secondary characteristic, they're primarily advertised and primarily described as like, oh man, they're going to be a tree structure, but it's just in a graph, and because it's visual, like our brains are better at dealing with that. And you know, I'm now actually now that I've done a lot of memory palaces, I actually believe a lot more in thinking visually. But back then I was like, all it is the same data in a bullet view in a tree format. That's useless. But the truth is, the power of mind maps is the linkages. And the thing is all the mind mapping software that you find out there, like you look at MindMeister or whatever, it's hierarchical. And because it's hierarchical, you really can't do this whole reflow the layout thing and see what clusters naturally emerge, which is the action that I wanted to go do.
Well, right.
And there's a lot more deals.
Well, the other thing, just a really simple observation I have is, you know, is a mind map, if a mind map is basically just like an outline in a two-dimensional form, is it not just a collection of a linear, you know, a collection of linear collections, right? Like if I have a point, and it's got, you know, 5 subpoints, those are just, that's just a linear ordering.
Well, and building off of that,
it's not actually the same thing.
Yeah, and what's interesting though is what you were saying, like what makes this concept new, and thinking about my response to that would be like, it would be the transformation of something that seems inherently linear, i.e. like a notepad that you write from top to bottom, into something that you parse out into something that looks 2D and looks like a diagram. And maybe that's a doable task specifically because diagrams are linear in some sense, I guess, and that like you could kind of write them out that way. So it's almost like these concepts flip back and forth between each other. And
well, it's interesting. Like, you know, think about outlines. Why did we ever learn as kids to write outlines? Yeah. It's because that's how you organize your thoughts to write a paper. And a paper is like the most linear thing ever, right? Like,
just a quick side comment. One of my good friends submitted her like undergraduate honors thesis or whatever it was at Stanford in comparative literature as a giant mind map with a lot of labeled edges. And she was like, you know what, look, if I compress this to any linear format, it's going to lose a lot of information. If you really want to understand this, you should do this and I'll guide you through how to read it. And I think that's like super cool.
So that's really cool, but that's not your traditional mind map. No. That's something that is, you know, mind map plus or something, right?
And also just one
it's more like what we're doing here.
Yeah, and one very cool thing is our thing has wormholes in it. So show my screen for a second.
And one last thing on wormholes, even before wormholes, we gotta remember that as we're talking about this 2D screen to 3D transition that we're all going through with the virtual and augmented reality and spatial intelligence push, is that I think with a pretty high degree of confidence that we are going to start visualizing data only in the 3-dimensional spaces. That we're going to be engaging it with our voices. We're going to be engaging it by actually moving it with our hands.
Still might want to be 2D though, even in that case. But I mean, I've got larger comments on that.
You have a lot of comments. Interesting, because I'm envisioning being able
layers of 2D things are really useful, by the way.
Layers of 2D things. That's very interesting. Yeah. Layers of 2D things. That's so cool, because I've been spending a lot of time envisioning Premiere and After Effects and Sketch and all these tools in a 3D space that I can engage with voice and with spatial intelligence movement rather than the meat sticks on the keyboard and the mouse. It's just way slower.
Yeah, and I totally,
effective.
and I think there's some cool 3D things you could do as well. But I mean, I'm personally really just into like visualizing the sweep of human activity in many layers. Like at the bottom layer, you've got like all the problems that people have, and you've got clusters of really, like let's look at Silicon Valley or the Bay Area. It's like, I had this vision once after a long Qigong practice session of like the sweep of human activity. And I was imagining, okay, if I really like it was like, my question I was asking was a sort of existential question, what the heck is going on here? And I somehow found it satisfying to answer that question literally. It's like, literally what is going on here? What are people doing around here? And so I was like, where am I? In the Bay Area. And I'm like, okay, what are people doing? And I'm like, okay, I'll look at all the projects people are working on and the problems they're complaining about and stuff like that. And so I had this like vision, which was really beautiful at the time to me, of like a bunch of, at the bottom, there's like a bunch of problems, just observations and problems. And sometimes people notice they all have the same problems, so they cluster together and form groups around the same problem. And then sometimes when there's a group of people around the same problem, they come up with an idea or many ideas, and that's sort of on the next level, standing above it. And you can see like the ideas that came out of these clusters of problems. That's okay. That's kind of cool. And then I was like, okay, if you look at that level, then there's like clusters of ideas, and a lot of the ideas connect to each other. And of course, there's cross-level connections as well. But I like to layer it out separately. And then you go up to the next level, and you get like categories of ideas, because these ideas form clusters, and you get categories. And then maybe those categories form categories. And then you start also from the top down. If you're like, okay, so like, what are we actually doing here? Like, what are we actually trying to achieve as a society? And it's like, you know, like on some level, like we're all really trying to build, like, what is government trying to achieve? I heard a joke, if pro is the opposite of con, does that mean that Congress is the opposite of progress? And I was like, okay, what if you actually...
Trying to build ideas of value into our world.
Yes, and this is actually a deeper rabbit hole. I did a bunch of research on government technology. So let me table that for a second, but let me finish the one point is, like from the top down, like if you really map out what society is trying to achieve. So this is like the bottom up piece of the vision I explained a second ago.
Again, it was problem, then idea, then collective idea.
And then like categories of ideas, and then meta categories and stuff like that. Okay. And then if you start from the top, it's kind of like, okay, what is society trying to achieve? And you're like, okay, well, really, like, or at least government in a theoretical world is trying to really build a utopia, not in the dystopian sense of utopia, but like in the actual like positive
We want
sense.
to become a pinnacle of a civilization, the best we can possibly be.
Mm-hmm. And underneath that, you've got like lots of subcategories that you could break that down into. Like you could say health, happiness, prosperity, tranquility, all these very high level values, many other values. Those are like the next level down. And then the next level down from that, you've got like, okay, like what does like tranquility look like? And part of it is peace of mind, and part of peace of mind is like no crime, and like so 0% crime goes down. And if you start these like utopian maps from the top, and then you start these like maps of what's actually happening from the bottom, eventually you can start like categorizing all actions that people are taking and seeing how they map onto these high-level goals, and either they're bringing these goals forward or they're not. And I did this project with progress bars that I could show off at some point. But anyway, the question is, when you start to do something, it's going to have like complex effects, some positive, some negative, and on the net, are we really moving ourselves towards these goals we want to achieve at a high level? And my personal belief is very optimistic. It's just like, if we really systematically coordinate our human actions, we could like lickety-split achieve basically everyone's basic needs being met. And the question is, how do we build tools? When we build cultural tools, cultural engineering is just as important, that really enable us to go like get together and all get more by working less. And actually, just as a quick side comment, because I'm remembering it right now, one concept that really attracts me is this idea of building labor-saving devices.
Yes.
Like for me, as a technologist, this just means I'm lazy as heck, and it just means like
you want more time for creativity.
And not just that, it's like I enjoy the act of building tools that automate a repetitive task, but I don't enjoy doing repetitive tasks. Like I was the nerd who in middle school, when I was given a word search for homework, spent 12 hours writing a program to solve word searches. And it was a doozy of a word search, I tell you. And the word search was like to learn your vocabulary and stuff like that. And it was a terrible way to learn vocabulary, but that was a fun program to write. Anyway, I love building these automated tools. And my point is, to build labor-saving devices, not labor-creating devices. Yes. And the issue with like this technology that addicts us and these walled gardens between different tools and stuff like that, like the fact that you can't see your emails and your LinkedIn feed and your Facebook feed, and you can't remember which tool to search in because there are all these artificial walled gardens.
Data silos.
The data silos, these are labor-creating devices that are, or barriers to labor-saving devices, at least.
They're barriers to labor-saving devices. They're barriers to unleashing our fullest potential. Absolutely.
And thank God email was like still on the pattern of a relic from the old days when people actually had utopian aspirations, because like, you know how all the chat clients shut down their APIs terrifyingly? Like, what if like you couldn't send emails to people who weren't on Gmail? What if you could only send emails to people on Gmail and not on
disaster.
Yahoo? Like, that's what the chat situation is like right now. And
that's an interesting point.
Yeah, so that's a point.
Can't send a Facebook message to someone on LinkedIn, can't send an Instagram DM to someone on Twitter.
Yeah,
this is a major problem because email, you can send your email to any other email account. That's very interesting.
And as a paradigmatic point here, that's super interesting here, is like, really, the devices that we have, they aren't really on our side. They're closer to being on the big company side than being on our side. Because if the devices were really on our side, it would be easy to write an iPhone app that's a meta chat app or something like that. But it's actually really hard to do that right now. You've got to grapple with all kinds of restrictions. But really, there should be this layer between like those companies' apps. Then it's like, okay, you've got your tool that processes stuff for you and like maybe auto-completes what you're going to say so you don't have to type as much. Or
well, this goes into what I was talking about with earlier with TCP/IP and lessons from the kind of the network side. What do I want as a, I'm going to write a user story around it. Like, as a human being, I want to communicate with other human beings in a way that is, most appropriate to the communication I am intending to send. And so, I would love to be able to just talk into my phone and say, hey, Siri, send an important message to Jacob Cole about need to change the time of our meeting this afternoon, and have her figure out, based on what she knows about Jacob Cole and what you pay attention to, and if this is an important message, okay, it's going to send it as a text. Or it's going to send it to you on Facebook Messenger because you use Facebook, or whatever. Like, I shouldn't have to know what your preferences are. That should be built into the protocol, in the protocol layer, right?
I absolutely agree with you. And the issue with how Siri and stuff are constructed is like Apple, which obviously isn't full of visionaries. Like, if you were running Apple, I would probably not be complaining about these things. Monty?
I tell you what, if I was running Apple or Google or LinkedIn or Facebook, the one thing I would address would be context, because the context is like the most important thing in our world. It's who do you know and how do you get in touch with contacts. Contacts, if you look at the Google suite of apps, contacts is a redheaded stepchild of Gmail. It's not even a top level app in the universe of Google. And I've talked about this with like some very high up people at Google, and they're just like, But why is this not?
It's a gold mine.
It's a gold mine. It is a gold mine.
Is your net worth.
Yes. Yeah.
And as a high level comment, by the way.
I mean, this is the way Microsoft can actually kill Google. If Microsoft actually put somebody visionary in charge of LinkedIn and figured out that what LinkedIn is actually about is human connection and not selling you recruiting, Facebook.
We're gonna do it.
Well,
because
it's hard.
It's hard.
Hard. You have to have the.
Everyone thought that about the incumbent industries that they wanted to overthrow, and so many people have successfully done it. And it's time in many ways for their slow-moving parts to potentially take a back seat to some fast-moving young people that can gain potentially hundreds of millions of people, because they provide a tremendous amount of value and they can really quickly do it. It's a big potential. It's something that I love thinking about. And
I agree.
Shall we get to wormhole?
Yes, and also I have plans for these, but I've got to think about how many of them I can discuss. Anyway, but anyway, let's talk about wormholes for a second. All right, so mind maps.
Your screen now?
Yep, show my screen.
Okay.
So, guys, check this out. Here's an idea that someone proposed, which was actually a real hackathon project at CalHacks.
If you can zoom in on the text, people can read it more.
Yeah. So one person's like, build an eye tracking heat map from your webcam. That's a cool thing, and that relates to Shazam for vision. It's just like uses an electrooculogram to look at what you're gazing at and identifies that thing. Could be useful for people with impaired vision especially. But anyway, it was a really well done hackathon project. But now let's talk about a wormhole. It's like, okay, I remember I saw a project somewhere else in this map, which is Shazam for plants, I think. And so I type this in, I say Shazam for plants. And look at that, there it is, there it is. Oh, and look at, I also found Shazam for TV. That's kind of cool. Hang on,
Okay.
let's see.
So that's your searching.
Yep, and let's add a couple connections here. Let's add Shazam for plants as a connection. Boom, it was just right over there, so.
And do you call this a knowledge graph? What do you call this?
I call it an idea graph because a knowledge graph is what Google's doing. And ideas are, this isn't knowledge, this is like a freaking hackathon project
an
idea.
idea graph.
Yeah.
And so you're able to easily search your idea graph.
And it's not about searching, it's about, as I'm composing.
One of the things
Yes,
is
yes.
searching, and then there's all of the connections and all the people that are contributing at the same time.
But that's not even it. That's not even the important thing here. The important thing here is I'm just going along making a mind map of things manually, and it augments my intelligence passively as I do it. And so, like Shazam for TV, that's connected, and we can do some natural language processing to suggest connections, which is pretty powerful, so you don't even have to write it manually. I think the whole idea of being just a simple intelligence augmentation notebook is best illustrated over here. So I say Jack Boffa, he's friends with Hayek Tupanian, and you know, Jack Boffa studied at Stanford. So I'm going to say studied at Stanford.
And this is, you are in just a standard Google Doc.
No, this is
Where
our note-taking interface on the computer.
Okay, you have a note-taking interface as well. Okay.
Yeah, and so you click on Stanford,
Interesting.
and you know what? That turned blue, and it auto-completed. So obviously the system knows something about Stanford. I click on Stanford, and voila, it knows a ton about Stanford. And it just surfaced this as I was typing like a normal person.
That's pretty cool. So then it has a way that you've added Stanford as kind of a Lego piece, and then Stanford, every time someone types Stanford, then the Lego piece populates in as a drop-down option, so they can go and drop that down. Is that how close?
Exactly.
Okay.
And so, I mean, you can just expand people indefinitely as well. Like, for instance, this is one of our customers, Silicon Valley Bank, and this is how apparently the chief of staff there, or he's former chief of staff.
But is this all literally being dropped down from Stanford to Silicon Valley Bank to all these people? Now you can drop down all these people, etc.
Yeah.
You just like let it infinitely go?
Yeah, and so this is, he apparently Silicon Valley Bank has this guy, Dave Kochbeck, who's connected to Doug Engelbart, whose intellectual rival is Marvin Minsky.
Holy cow, and then all of a sudden you'll be like, wait, how does this person connect to one of my close friends? And then you'll be like, I didn't know you were connected to that person.
Yeah, like, wait, are you connected to any of these people that we're looking at right here on the screen, Monty? Xerox Park, Doug Engelbart, JCR Licklider, Alan Kay. I don't know. Actually, this is a kind of cool thing. I mean, so what we could do is, let's just do this. It's kind of cool. I can say, well, let's just pivot around Monty for a second.
Jack's getting the love because we're trying to get Jack up that pro site.
Yeah, we're trying to build me the homepage.
That homepage.
This could be it. These two facts about me. That's my entire whole universe.
Well, what's kind of cool is, like, for instance, okay, so let's just, so what's the name of this podcast going to be?
The name of the podcast is, I believe it was Human AI Hybrid.
Well, just hang on for a second. So simulation series, right?
Yes, you can just say simulation. Yeah.
Simulation series, Human AI Hybrid podcast.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, so I'm going to say that, and I'm going to be like, okay, and so I'm going to call it, say, participant of Simulation Series Human AI Hybrid Podcast. Now, participant Jack Boffa, Monty Kosma, Jacob Cole, and how do you spell your whole name, Alan?
Allensaakyan.
Okay, boom.
You know, I just got to tell you, maybe it's the Burning Man in you, but you wrote Party Pants.
Party pants.
Party Pants. I left my party pants at home.
Yep.
Sorry.
Participant of. Well, the cool thing is, by the way, the cool thing is...
will it intelligently, like, figure out
figure out the relationship.
Yeah.
Participants. There you are. Do you see that? It just pivoted and it detected that I had the same relationship. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And so I typed that in. It's like Alan Sakyan, friends with Alex K. Chen. I click on Alex K. Chen. You can see like many things that Alex is connected to, like the Alex K. Chen Mafia. And if I pivot around the Alex K. Chen Mafia, we can see.
So this is based on your repository of all this information.
Yep, and this is my team and my collective brain here. And it just allows me to just start typing and take notes, and oops, if my teammate took notes on it, I just summon all their notes instantly.
So what's the deal with this collective that you have that other people can access? Can we tap into this collective database of when we type in Stanford that all this can be populated?
Shortly, you will be able to. We're going to have many levels of a graph. Some are public, some are private. We're focused on doing this for enterprise internally right now. Cool. And we're working hard to get to a place where we can make a public version, which is going to make it exponentially better for everybody.
Just follow up on that. Enterprise, using this today,
Yeah.
what are the use cases where people come to you and say, I want to give you piles of money so that I can use this? What is the problem it's solving for them?
Well, there's a couple of problems. The first problem is it ultimately comes down to the connecting people who should be connected problem.
Yes.
And it can either happen internally or externally.
As soon as possible.
So, for instance, some large corporations, especially those that have acquired lots of other companies, have many redundant teams and many redundant projects going on, and they want to deduplicate these. On the other side, certain investment research arms, like one I can talk about, Silicon Valley Bank, they have a vested interest in all of the companies who are banking with them doing really well. So they want to connect them with each other and the other resources that are relevant to them. So they map out the whole startup ecosystem. They understand who the key influencers are. They can see on the map because they can see these people are connected to all the high-performing companies. And then they can find also when there are synergies between projects that different of their customers are working on. Lastly, if you want to understand like a new industry, such as like one kind of cool one is autonomous driving that we've made a map of over here. You can really quickly understand, I think it's autonomous vehicles. You can really quickly understand like what are the key component parts, even if you knew nothing about the industry. If I go into guidance systems, go into sensors over here.
And have you built out all this data, or did you get this from somewhere? Or?
It's human AI hybrid constructed, so we can pull it from many different sources, such as scraping the web, reading internal documents that are unstructured or structured. Then humans can review it and make sure it's all in a curated format. But the result is a pretty awesome knowledge graph, which you can also always add to. Like, it only takes a couple people who are working really hard to make an awesome map that's very informative to a lot of other people.
So the companies want to pay the big bucks for this because they want to make the connections to the right people and the right organizations that they need to advance their innovation departments and their own.
Yeah, it's either because they want to do this internally or because they want to do this internal to their company, or they want to do it external in the world. And so just to finish this example real quick, this is kind of nifty. So autonomous vehicles industry, like who knows what goes into this thing unless you're an expert? Well, guidance systems, sensors. Sensors include cameras and radar and LiDAR. And what the heck is LiDAR if you didn't?
That is awesome. I love this type of stuff.
And it's like,
it shows the interconnectedness.
Yeah.
Photodiodes make LiDAR over here. Here's a couple companies that make photodiodes. Like, these are all going to be impacted by the growth of the autonomous vehicles industry.
And that's way faster than if you were to try and go to LiDAR on Wikipedia and then try and find the companies that did LiDAR on Wikipedia.
Well, the important thing is it's what you really do in your brain after you do all that Wikipedia researching. And the thing is, we want to prevent people from boiling the ocean twice. So basically, if one person just spent hours learning about this industry and they create this map in their brain, they should be able to share it, and then the next person in the company who wants to go.
That is exactly what I do. I spend time parsing information and synthesizing it, and then I go live and I talk about it, because at least then I'm taking that, what did you call it earlier? You're taking your cognition and you're exporting it.
Externalized?
Yeah, you're externalizing your cognition. I'm externalizing parts of my mental lattice, and that way others can then come in and tweak.
That's a good word.
Wait,
that's a good word for that. Yeah, the mental lattice is a good word.
Hashtag quote, hashtag phrase. By the way, I just say this because I know in the future my audio parsing script will be able to find hashtags when in my speech. So if I say hashtag phrase, I'll be able to find it in the future.
Yeah.
You just need to build an Alexa app interface to your.
Yeah, exactly. But go ahead.
That's cool.
Yeah, there you go.
I hear what you're saying there. That if you say the hashtag book, etc., that hashtag phrase, that your audio parsing algorithm will pick that stuff up, and that's very interesting that you do that. And that may be a key part of the way we engage with voice in the future. I'm glad that you like the idea of a mental lattice.
Yeah.
Mental lattice is, I mean, it's, and you know, the idea of map we keep throwing around, but it is kind of like a map. I mean, one of the things that you get looking at autonomous vehicles this way in idea flow that you don't get as readily, reading a bunch of articles on Wikipedia or wherever you go to find them, or Google searching about it, is it's like the difference between, if I'm going to go to Paris, right? I can look at a map of the city.
Do you want to wait a bit and show?
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, if I'm going to Paris, I can look at a map of the city, and I'm going to have a very different understanding of Paris looking at a map of a city versus just showing up and walking around, right?
Yeah.
And I get a sense of the whole and the parts and how do they relate to each other. And then, you know, and then I can go read a guidebook and I can go deep and really learn a lot, or I can go visit the city itself. But those are all very different and much more intense, focused, deep activities. And if what I want to do is get a sense of the whole, this is the way you have to do it. Otherwise, you could spend, 20 years exploring Paris.
And another just interesting, very ancient way of understanding this is how someone took months or years of their life to write a book, and then someone else reads it in 8 hours.
Yeah.
So then let's play on this example. I'm so tied to figuring out how to best do this. Let me piggyback on my example a little bit longer for you to get where I'm coming from here. If I go and I build out this mental lattice around an edge of knowledge, and I synthesize it and disseminate it in really relatable ways to general audiences of people, then they go and watch this period that I took hours and hours to synthesize down to maybe 20-30 minute video. Then we're asking the audience to be able to somehow engage with this piece of content in some other way, and the best way right now is YouTube comments. And that's a joke. There needs to be a different way for the community to be able to build on this platform. And one of the things that we deal with in community building is we aim to figure out better ways for the people that are part of the subscribership of a channel like Simulation to be able to talk to each other about the content that they are watching, and to be able to link up with each other via email or via chats and etc. And so
look, video is. I was the COO and I ran Fandor, one of the first Netflix competitors, and we were dealing with video. Video is really challenging content. It's linear. It's experienced, in sequence, and it's very, very challenging. If you want to sit back and just take it in, it's great. But it is a very, very high. I guess you would call it, it's very demanding. It demands a lot of attention to actually get something out of it. And if what I really want is to take our whole conversation and find the part that was about thinking machines and MetaWeb, and really go deep on that, I can't do it. I really can't do that. What I need is a two-dimensional idea flow map of the video that allows me to go there to listen to that part and then have a conversation with people in the context that's created by the map.
Right now, the best way to do that would be to take the entire transcription of this video and then look for thinking machines, and then go to that timestamp in the video, watch that portion, and then from there be like, now where do we go in the knowledge graph into thinking?
Yeah,
further?
but the problem there is that like, but if what I want to do is actually engage with another member of the audience, or with one of us about that subject, there's no way for us to organize that conversation and have it in a coherent way.
Yes.
In a YouTube comment. I mean, that's not going to work.
Exactly.
Because YouTube comments also straight linear.
This must transition soon. Let's go back to this. Yes.
So I mean, by the way, I'm just starting to map out some notes from this conversation, and it's really interesting actually. So,
can we see your notes?
Yeah, you can take.
Okay, cool. All right. So explain to us which notes you've been taking.
Yeah. So these notes aren't super duper ambitious, and you know the reason is because my purpose here with these notes is actually different than transcribing the conversation.
Right.
Like if we're transcribing the conversation, we could also do it in a format like this. And we could just show the branches and flows and stuff. And we could also show the interconnections back. And maybe I should actually type this up and do it. But it would be so sweet if we could have that in real time on the show. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like what? Let's just actually get like one branch in here.
Stop immediately right there. We've been for the longest time on the show talking about how important it is for the guest that is on the show and the host that are having nuanced discourse to also have a simultaneous knowledge graph being built out simultaneously that the viewership can engage with. One moment. And then not only are they watching this knowledge graph, they're engaging with it. You can see the key points being made along the way, and you can reference it along the way. Remember in the first 10 minutes when we talked about that point?
Yep.
Then at the end, there are takeaways, which is the biggest thing that people are asking for nowadays, is what is the takeaway after your talk? What is the takeaway after the lecture? What is the takeaway after this meeting? Blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? At the end of every single one of these dialogues, we will have knowledge graph plus main takeaways at the end of the episode. So we have to follow a discourse model that runs with the knowledge graph and in the action items, and I'm really passionate about building that into the show and making that popular. And this is a problem when you look at Monk debates, you look at Intelligence Squared debates. You want to get these things onto stages, onto 50,000 seat sports stadium stages, which is where we want to take intellectual discourse at the global level. The way to get there is by adding really cool technology like knowledge graphs, like action items, like group meditations.
Well, I mean,
for them to engage with it as it's building out.
At a lot of big conferences, a couple of times, like at CES, I think, you have giant keynote speaker. They'll have an artist with a giant piece of paper who draws, and it's just it's a cartoon, and they try to capture. It's two-dimensional, right? It's interesting, and you've got pictures, and a lot of the ideas end up being represented. Now, I don't know if they're doing that with any sense of like where it's going, or if they're completely improving that as they go. But that's the only thing that even resembles that I've seen.
Yes, it's close. Yes.
I mean, there's
Stop in your tracks. That was so funny.
There's a few. No, I mean, there's a good stop. There's better. You're gonna say anything better than what I was gonna say. So please. Okay. So I want to share something kind of cool. One of my friends suddenly had his eyes open to the world when he tried an exercise, which is to have a conversation with someone else on paper.
LSD. Yes, that was the exercise. But eyes open to the world. Yes.
But bro, you know what? It's even easier than that. All you need to do is try to have a conversation with someone as if you're both mute and you have to write on paper to communicate with each other.
Because then you automatically become laconic.
Well, that's not the point. Okay. That's not the point at all.
That's an interesting point, though.
It is an interesting point, but that's not at all the point.
Teach us the point.
The point is that it starts to feel really unnatural really quickly to just have like a chat stream of dialogue. Instead, it's like, no, we're branching over here, so you go to the side, and then you start branching, and then you write it on that side. And then it's like, okay, we're going to go back to the main branch, and you go back to the main branch. And if anyone...
This is so awesome, because it's just like this conversation has had this main aspect of the flow, but then all these branches that have went off.
Yeah, and we branched and
physically represent.
And you just physically do it, and it's just what happens. Like it's so like it's so unnatural to have a chat dialogue when you start writing on paper. And the only reason that our chat dialogues are like chat dialogues is because the medium of chat are like in this linear format. It's because the medium of chat does not allow us to do this branching thing.
Why doesn't the medium of chat get there faster? It's been so long. We've had over a decade now, 15 years plus, to evolve this out to something that's more branchy.
Are you talking about the medium of like
text messages?
Text messages or like literal in-person conversations?
Text messages.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true of in-person conversations too.
It's
I
true-
guess
it's true
is that
of
it's like
in-person conversations.
there's an inherent limitation in that technology that we have, which is our mouths
That's
to like represent information that way.
We're not
And
knowledge graphing everything we do.
right,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
you're
absolutely-
limited by
Alan-
the like brains of everyone involved to actually keep track.
But we have a great model. I mean, just to throw this in. I mean, in any single-threaded computational system, if you're using like a decent programming language like Lisp, for example, which is what I would use, you've got the idea of stack frames and lexical closures, and like we do that in our conversations. We don't really think about it that way, but that's what we do. And if we actually were good about, if we were actually really good about, about stack frames and stack maintenance and garbage collection, our conversations would probably be a lot more effective. But it's hard to do that because we're relying on our own crappy memory.
It's not our fault. It's not our fault. It's just the fact that like our brains are infinite, but our memory is like our creativity and desires are infinite, but our memory is limited. This is so sad, and we can augment our memory and then think bigger thoughts and do bigger things. I've been augmenting my memory in my thought stream right now, keeping track of the conversational stack, which has more points on it. But let's not even get there.
I love it.
It would be a fun exercise, actually. It would be a fun exercise. I don't know if I'm going to do it, but maybe someone out there in listener land would do it, to create like the stack frame flow of this conversation and just see what we could learn from that. I mean,
literally
it'd be fascinating to see.
like
Like just the
someone manually
ideas. Like
map
we were
out
talking about this, and then
Yeah.
that led to this,
wow.
and then we went to this, and did we ever get back?
Yeah,
You
and
know?
as a
knowledge
start,
graph.
Yeah.
we can use otter.ai to transcribe it to begin with, which is like this frighteningly good transcription app. It's ridiculously good, and I highly recommend downloading it and just using it to transcribe all kinds of conversations. But like as a very heavy voice recognition user, I'm distinctly impressed by it, and it works even if your phone's on the table.
Okay, but that's a first step. But
And then you have to manually make it into the tree slash graph.
Manually make it into the tree slash graph. But then at
Yeah.
least we have this vodcast that ends up being completely branched out into
Yeah,
a knowledge
precisely.
graph, which
Yeah.
is a first step in showing other people that this is the way that we want to explore synthesizing the complex and nuanced conversation into knowledge graphs.
Précisément.
Precisement. Precisement. Say that again.
Précisément. I don't actually speak French.
It's a good accent.
Thank you.
Okay, so where were we on dropping more of the? Do you
Well,
want to show
I mean,
more
I was
and
just
then-
starting to go do this, and actually, real quick, can we solicit viewers to see if anyone wants to take notes on this conversation and help us do transcribing it? And in general, like,
Of course.
do you think we could solicit to see if maybe someone listening real time would be interested in being our transcriber, like someone who types really fast, or maybe as a court reporter even, but who just types hella fast can like take notes on what we're doing?
That is likely out of the caliber of current viewership. This is not the Joe Rogan experience, so we do not have 30,000 concurrent viewers, and a bunch of them are really fast words per minute typers, and that they can do that. But
We can speak to our future viewers.
we can speak to the future viewers. So if there are people that want to be doing that, then you can. The email address is in the bio, simulationseries@gmail.com. Just send us what you've typed up afterward, and then we'll pass it along to the team, and then we'll include you in the loop, and then we'll be building out this branched out knowledge graph.
Well, I'm inspired by one of your previous ideas, just to link the thread back. That you had one of your idea flow diagrams you were showing about hackathon ideas.
Yes.
And you know what we should do? We just take this conversation, take all the data from it, the audio, the video, whatever, the transcription. If we can, massage one up and run a hackathon. Let's run a hackathon around it. See what tools we can create that create a map, a visual map, two-dimensional map, whatever it is. What ideas do people come up with, and use this as the input?
Monty,
Wouldn't that be fun,
this will move
that would be
us
fun.
in the direction of getting
Yeah.
the knowledge graph for every single
Right,
student.
because if you can sponsor a hackathon around that and you get a bunch of brilliant people in the room to take this and see what you can do with it, then you can start to generalize from that.
Especially if we make the
tools around it.
assumption that this serves as a good sort of poster child for a like intellectual conversation that follows some sort of framework of like what we were talking about with going up the stack and then down the stack again. If we have that structure to this conversation, then maybe that makes it an easier, like almost an easier meta platform.
We get Tim because he would use this on his podcast. This is exactly the kinds of conversations.
Actually, just
we just get him to fund the little hackathon, and we'll do it. We'll build this.
I mean, I'll fund the hackathon if that comes down to it.
Okay,
I don't mind if someone else also wants to help. Actually, this sparks two comments. First comment is, if anyone wants to hack with us on related stuff, please hit me up at jacob@ideaflow.io. And actually, if people who are like good at JavaScript or good at iOS especially, but all kinds of stuff, want to work with me, that's also, we're hiring, and that's great.
That's a good plug. That's jacob@ideaflow.io. So definitely do follow up because that is an exciting thing. Let's make this hackathon happen.
And
this knowledge graph
at the very least, let's hack on hackathon project. Like, look, like the world is but a hackathon, and we are but poor hackers who hacked but briefly upon it. And that's like, I think the future of work will.
It's a hackathon project. What is it? Hashtag phrase.
Yes, now it'll be picked up in all posterity. And so, yeah, the truth is, I think, like all that we call work these days could come. There's a famous quote which is, "Find a happy person and you will find a project." And hashtag quote.
Hashtag quote.
Yeah. This is distance high five. Distance high five.
Distance high five.
Yeah.
We're becoming addicted to logging. I love it. And in new ways, in more effective ways.
You know, imagine we could just search through and say every time you said hashtag quote ever in your life, then it would just like pull up all those things.
Gosh, you're making my life sound so amazing in comparison to what it's like right now. See, this is what I'm saying. This 3,000 plus note taker. If it was just possible to just walk around and be like, these things are listening to us anyways. Why don't they just do the recording?
Yeah, I mean, as long as the NSA is going to listen to us, they might as well supply us with some useful data. And
this thing's checking for OK Google and OK Siri and etc.
Yeah. You got to whisper it or they would hear us.
So why not? Because that actually does make a lot of sense for making our lives better, to be able to pull up a full quote base from childhood until now. That would be so interesting to pull up.
Like
hashtag neuroscience.
Everything.
All these great articles, all these great leaders across the world. Oh, how about Hong Kong neuroscientists? Oh, okay, cool. Let's go to the next step.
And
this is what is behind you.
And you could even search. You know what you could even do is do some really cool post-processing. And whenever it hears you talking with like a particularly peaceful or particularly excited tone of voice, you could bring up all the times you had a very peaceful tone of voice. And then it would understand the context previously. And I mean, this is a brave new world here, guys. And it's amazing. Actually, I don't even like using that phrase. What it really is just an awesome future that we can live in this super futuristic future that's way cooler than most of the sci-fi's imaginations of future.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to put it. And we have to build it, so let's get going on it. Let's make this hackathon happen. This is a great first step in that direction. I love it. Let's make it happen. Let's get knowledge graphs rolling and more popularity with action items as well. This is very exciting.
Yeah, and go ahead.
I was just wondering, what else shall we cover on the way out?
Yeah. Well, I actually want to just follow up on one point of something you said, or we just alluded to earlier, just to touch back on something that there is. This is all nice, and you can apply it to academic research and doing better and all that. It is worth pointing out to the VCs and investors out there. There is a lot of value to be created. I mean, just the tools. Just for example, like just the tools that the business processes I created and the tools that we used in the P&G Gillette deal. We saved just by doing that. On the entire legal fees for the $50 billion merger, we saved 15% of the total legal bill. And this is the kind of promise that is out there. I'm working now in the realm of construction, and we're talking about $1 billion plus projects. You think about what is going on in our world. We're building these massive data centers all over the world. We're building 5G networks. Yeah. We're building massive oil and gas energy projects. We're building wind farms. I mean, all these things they have a lot of zeros on them.
Yes.
And, you know, construction's the only industry that has had declining productivity over the last 20 to 30 years.
Whoa.
It's nuts. That's another whole story. But
Does that have something to do with corruption?
no, well, it has something to do with claims. And it has something to do with, it's actually really hard to manage large projects. It's really, really hard. And and many of the tools that have been developed are actually counterproductive.
Yeah.
But what happens, this is the hybrid, this is like
production at these big stages,
Yeah.
these 1,000, 10,000 seat stages. There's hundreds of people involved across different,
Well, you know, and you know, it's just like, I mean, who does waterfall code development anymore, right? But that's a lot of the way these projects are run. It's essentially the same thing. And, you know, so some of this is you know, applying Agile. A lot of it is applying machine learning because there's so many, you know, you're solving a multi-thousand dimensional problem. So the opportunity to create value by taking this kind of hybrid man-machine approach. Part of it is on knowledge, but part of it is also just sort of traditional machine learning stuff. Let's test all the options and see what actually performs. So all these different realms, there's just massive, massive value to be created, and you know that improves our world in so many ways, right?
I'm so happy that you brought that up because this speaks to how much not only value there is in making the world better, but also in people actually making money by investing into this field. And I still am still trying to wrap my mind around how many of these mergers and acquisitions happen all the time around the world, where if they just had better tools to be able to parse data and knowledge and ideas and people and all this stuff that could save tons of, it's extremely interesting. Okay, so closing time.
Yeah, so I got a few quick comments.
Okay.
Yeah, so first on the previous topic, so if we did map out these conversations, you know, my experience, and maybe your experience too, is I have a lot of very repetitive conversations. And I watch people discovering and rediscovering the same thing over and over again in conversations like this. Yeah. And what I would love to do is create not just a map of our conversation, but a map of all these conversations that are happening in the world and find the overlapping graphs of conversations.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. Yes.
That's, yeah, absolutely.
And like, then maybe you could even fast forward to the end. No, I don't think that's the right solution here. But what the point is to understand that there's a lot of things that are repeating themselves.
You build on top.
And you can build on top of them. Exactly.
Because what you do is when you take and you see a conversation like the one that we had here tonight, and then we see the similarities with what we talked about along with so many other of these knowledge graph, collective learning, intelligence style conversations that are happening, we see the overlaps, then we can build on the overlaps moving forward, because it seems like so many people care about that. So then how do we actually build action items from that?
Well, like, there's probably someone literally on YouTube who's had a conversation that's very, very pertinent to what we're doing here and what we're talking about here, and maybe it's even covered some of the same points. And I would love to see that overlapping conversation.
Definitely.
And we just collaboratively, by having all these conversations in the world, what we're all doing is contributing to that knowledge graph, to that map, that giant map of conversation space, of all conversations that have been had. We are boldly pushing that bubble of conversation space larger and larger.
That's right.
And so, okay, another point real quick.
Do you want to show a screen?
No. Another point is an action item. Actually, no, before the action item, one thing. Yeah, so if I had to like point at a field that VCs are not looking into enough right now, I would also say intelligence amplification. This is a phrase that you should look up. You should also look up on Wikipedia Doug Engelbart and look at his guiding philosophy. It was the most awesome result of an existential crisis forever, and that guy is my intellectual hero. But
interesting, Doug Engelbart. What was the role in?
What's the what?
What was his?
He was the inventor of the mouse, among many other things, but the father of the field of intelligence amplification, or IA.
And teach us about IA, intelligence amplification.
I mean, okay, so very quick overview here. The idea, since humans were pre-humans, is like our entire part of our thing is we make tools, and I feel very much I feel very satisfied being a tool maker. And Doug Engelbart is like, yo, let's use these computers to create tools that augment our ability to manipulate information, just like we've built incredible labor-saving devices to make it easier to go farm and do all kinds of physical things. This is contrasted to at least AI in its original form, and often as it's implemented now. It's like, yo, we're going to, from the top down, just try to make something that will think, to make a machine that will think. And
So
IA is building tools.
Down, IA
It goes bottom up. And they meet in the middle someday.
Yes, they do. Yeah. Very interesting. So that would be some of the tools we were talking about earlier, these tools that help humans with human-centric values.
Yeah.
And this can be some of the more bottom-up style tools. Interesting. And and AI is some of the more kind of like robotic style tools that are coming.
And Minsky and Engelbart had a famous debate about IA versus AI, and Engelbart was like, yo, but what would it do for the humans? What's it going to do for the humans? And Minsky's like, you know, if we're lucky, the AI will keep us as pets. But that's a different discussion.
Can I ask, I mean, this is a question that is now pressing enough, I may as well ask.
Okay.
May AGI just be the next evolution in big history?
So AGI is very, very interesting. So like there's a
superintelligence.
Yeah,
there's the next evolution.
There's lots of talk on this front, and I want to make a couple comments. You know, I think it easily can and may be, and it's going to be great. I see some plausible paths to it that could happen, both from the top down and the bottom up approaches, and they're very interesting.
I'm talking like 2100, let's say.
I don't want to put dates on it. Just in my report. But sure. All right. So.
Digitize your consciousness. Be a part of the superintelligence.
And most importantly, if you upload your consciousness, you can make backup copies, and then you can also send it to other planets as fast as you can send information. But that's
right.
A large different discussion.
That's right, and that's very exciting stuff.
But
and certain people can stay biological if they want to. Go for it.
Yeah.
We're not removing your degrees of freedom.
Anyway, lots of profound insights from meditation about like where does the self end and the other begin. That will be made super apparent as a result of all that brain uploading stuff that may happen at some point. But that's a different discussion.
Okay, sure.
The important point here is there are certain tasks which I find it implausible that anything that is in the current machine learning revolution will actually be able to perform. An example of these tasks, and even if they did, it wouldn't matter, is the other point that would be interesting. It wouldn't really matter, but it's like, okay, I studied computer science and English literature, and what I do as an English literature person is I'll read a quote, and I'll be like, wow, that's a profound quote. And I'm like, you know, that relates to some quote that I read.
Hashtag quote, of course.
Hashtag quote, and then it relates to, angle brackets, some quote from another book that I read like a long time ago. And it's like speaking of the same truth. And when two wise quotes speak of the same truth, this is like an indicator that something is even deeper going on beneath that gave rise to that truth. And this is what you write essays about. This is how you write essays. This is what essays are about, is finding these deep linkages between concepts either within a book or across books and linking them all together. And this is what forming a thesis is. This is like what they, you know, I didn't realize how profound, like middle school English class made it really boring, but I didn't realize how profound writing those 5-paragraph essays of theses could be if you actually do it from that bottom-up way until like midway through college, and just it's about connecting these insights and actually uncovering these things, not about the essay. Anyway.
Any last thoughts?
So the important point here is like if you built a machine that could like understand some profound quote and find your related quote, it would be super useful and super interesting. But a lot of the deepest connections are mediated by the vector of human experience. And so like if you haven't had a certain human experience, there's no way that you're going to relate some quote to something else. And that's not a task that, even if it were replaced, would stop humans from doing it, because it's still fulfilling for us to see these connections internally, though it may help us along. That's the first comment. The last comment is this. This is an action item.
Okay.
And this is a takeaway, hashtag takeaway. And it's slightly tangential, it seems, but it is actually tangential in the real sense of tangential, meaning it's connected and branching. And this is really actionable. Why did I start making this database of ideas? Why did this all get started? And it's because I saw people around me working on things that were way suboptimal for them to be working on in terms of their own happiness, their money making, good for the world, any of these things. Right now, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit ideas that we could just do. We could snap our fingers here in Silicon Valley and help people in a huge way in all parts of the world, here locally and in a distant way. And all that's lacking is the connection of the people who can execute the ideas to the ideas, and the connection of the people to each other, and the curated database of really good ideas. So what I want to do is begin a project mapping out many steps here. Firstly, I want to make a database of all the projects going on in the Bay Area. I want to make a database of all the projects going on at Stanford. Beautiful. I want to make a database of all the ideas that people have in the Bay Area, all the ideas that people have, let's say Stanford or anywhere. It's just a starting point. Yeah. I want to then make a database of all the problems that people are facing in the Bay Area. All the problems that people are facing at some subset of Stanford is just to show the scope. I chose Stanford as an example. It's nothing special, and we have a representative right here. The last thing is, so I really care about the world. And like my mom was in the Peace Corps in Tanzania, and I ran a telehackathon that teamed students there to work on projects with students at MIT. And the projects they were working on were like freaking brilliant, and they were low-hanging fruit, and they were way more impactful and many times more interesting than the kinds of things that people generally work on in hackathons here. So I want to make a database of the ideas and problems that people are facing, and invite the readership to contribute either low-hanging fruit ideas that just need to get implemented, that they're aware of, that they want to connect over or connect other people over. And I want to invite people to contribute the problems that they're facing as well. And I may propose that they do it at the interface of a big Google document, hackathonprojects.jacobcole.net. Just add the ideas at the top of this thing, put your email down, and just literally add them right here. Just show my screen real quick. Yep. And just throw the ideas on this Google document. And this will be the start of a huge repository of really worthwhile ideas and problems, and maybe we'll be able to connect you with some relevant people to go work together on these problems or connect you with ideas.
Awesome. Love it. That's a great action item. And we gotta do these action items. These are so crucial.
And we're gonna run this hackathon also on this conversation.
We'll make that happen. We'll make that happen, and we'll make. We need a Bay Area project graph, and we need that. That's a great idea, and to see how we can help link up the right people and get people working on projects, etc. Normally, we ask a couple questions at the end of the show, but we'll wrap, and then we can ask you guys another time some of the questions, because otherwise we're at such a length already. Maybe we ask you guys what's the most beautiful thing in the world. Just the last question I'm asking the show.
I have a quick answer.
Oh, what is it?
I mean, for me, if I could just point out one piece of technology, it is not a piece of technology. It is, well, in a traditional sense, but it is technology. My favorite thing in the world is practicing Qigong, which is like Tai Chi, but really basic. You do simple things where you hold your arms up for 5 minutes and lift the elbows a little bit and unkink things, just so that you can imagine that there's this imaginary fluid flowing through their shoulders that are really tight right now. Relax those shoulders. Lift those. And lift your armpits. My teacher says, imagine there are chihuahuas in your armpits and you don't want to squish them. And you can really start to feel this flow and this connection between your hands and I think if everyone could do 20 minutes of Qigong, this very embodied sort of meditation every morning, and feel as good as I do about it and really enjoy it like I do, I can't think of anything, no technology, nothing in my life that would have a bigger impact in the world.
That's a good one. Keep going.
That's it. What are you guys' most beautiful things in the world?
For me, I would say, I don't know if you can switch the inputs, but I would say existence when I thought about the answer to that question. There's a sort of like philosophical musing on that, which would be like existence is the thing that creates the ability to perceive beauty in the first place. So you kind of have to have it as a prerequisite. But it really is the, or I guess I should say consciousness more than that, existence. Like the fact that we are here and able to actually, like, these arrangements of molecules have gained the ability to see and understand other things outside of it, and that the world isn't just like completely, you know, a bunch of things hitting each other, but is really like, you know, all these people and these beings who can understand and perceive stuff. I think that's like probably the most beautiful thing in the world.
Well, it's almost like we are channeling the forces of nature to go do things that are, I guess there's a deep relationship between what I said and what you said, which is like becoming aware of energy, not my own. And realizing that things just happen inside my mind and outside of my mind, and where does that even end or begin? But without my intention. And being able to channel that is what I think existence is.
Yeah.
The universe observing and experiencing itself.
And that's what computers are too. By the way, it's channeling the universe's tendency to compute the next state from the previous. Anyway.
I think for me, I would say there's a lot of probable kind of candidates, and the hard part is how to express it. I think I would say that it's the getting another person and being gotten by them, and when those align, there's nothing better than that. That is the most beautiful thing.
It's like an expansion of who you are when that happens.
Yeah.
It's like you're not just your Aruba, it's like, whoa, there's two, I'm just bigger.
Yeah.
All right, wouldn't be simulation if we didn't ask you, are we in a simulation?
There's that argument of like probabilistically we have to be, since like if every, you know, universe with intelligent whatever ends up creating simulations, then you have like a top level universe and then a chain downward of like this simulation then creates this simulation, which creates this simulation. And then the number of simulations you have is vastly larger than the number of top level universes. But I don't know. I still think probably not.
I think the best way to find out is to create things so beautiful that the people who made the simulation have to talk to us.
Yeah, that's
That's
a great response. I like that one.
That is good.
That's a good response.
Maybe they already have.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Is this a simulation? I don't think so. I mean, we start to get into the metagame of, well, what is a simulation? Sometimes I think it is, sometimes I don't. I don't think so today.
And last thing is, what do you guys think is the core driving principle of your life?
Oh man, I have this in my thought stream. 1 second.
He doesn't know his core driving principle. He's got to look it up. That's kind of hilarious, Jacob.
Okay, hang on. You answer first real quick, and then
Do you guys have an answer?
I'll go.
I mean, I guess for me it changes probably every 3 months roughly. But maybe right now is to just experience things and think about things, which is like an extremely vague, canned answer. But like, I think that does actually like apply to what I've been trying to do a lot right now when I think about it. Especially like since I just graduated from school, but I haven't like, you know, funneled myself into a full-time job yet. This seems like a good time for me to do those sorts of things, I think. So yeah, that's been forefront in my mind, I'd say.
Guiding principle.
Or driving force.
Or the driving force. Driving force?
Yeah, either one works.
The driving force. I mean, I love transformation. I love making a difference to you and to you and to you and to the people that I interact with, whether they're my family or my clients or my girlfriend or whatever it may be, my kids. But with this caveat to it, that I want to make a difference to you in what matters to you, in the realm that is really important to you. So that's, I think, my guiding principle.
That's also a lot of adjusting oneself to the circumstances that they're into. Yeah. But that's really important. Transformation is so crucial. Beautiful. Yes, sir?
So I'll give the answer that I gave when I was younger, and now my refinement, which I realize it touches at. When I was about 13, my mom asked me this question while we were walking down the beach. I said, maximize surfing potential. Maximize potential to go surfing. Not just for me, but for all of us. And surfing takes lots of forms. You know, a lot of things you can realize are surfing, like when you surf the waves of thoughts that bubble up in your mind in meditation, that's also a form of surfing. Yeah. It's also about channeling energy, not your own. And if you maximize surfing potential, this would entail a lot of things. In a very literal way, I was thinking it then. It's like, you know, if you've got really good wave pools in like the Middle East everywhere, everyone's going to be surfing, and then they're not going to be like being terrorists. And that was my middle school conception of this whole thing. And you know, then I really realized there's another several levels on this. And if I had to nail one thing, it would be to maximize the flow of love and of chi. And you got to release a lot of kinks in the world for that to happen, a lot of stuck places. It's realizing that there's all this unnecessarily held tension, and really seeing where this unnecessarily held tension is. And you can see how it's to be so much better. And then when you release it, it's just so satisfying. It doesn't matter if it's in you or another person, because what does that even mean? It's just tension. And when I connect people to each other, it's like unlocking that potential in the world.
Yes.
And it's getting that boom.
Yes.
When I practice Qigong, I unlock the muscle, the tension in my mind and in my body, and sometimes even in the world around me, that is restricting the flow of love and my attention. When I help someone who's having a struggling emotional time, what it really comes down to is there's this blockage or this restriction, and I want to unblock that restriction. Or if a couples therapist goes and helps a couple that's having a bad time, it's not about what's right and wrong, it's about what keeps the love flowing. And if I had to generalize, I would say all these things I'm doing are trying to maximize. It always hits me in those, I hit these profound states of mind from the most unusual and unexpected places.
Flows of love.
I suddenly feel like, wow, this is a profound moment. This is what I was always trying to build. And I say that love is the thing that allows you to forgive when you really feel that profound state and you're right there, you realize that, you know, that this is really like, you can suddenly forgive yourself your 10,000 past mistakes, because you realize, you know, this thing that I have right now, this is the thing that I spent all my lifetime trying to build. And no matter what I screwed up on, I just achieved the thing. And it doesn't matter what else happened, and it's now.
Dang, this was super fun. I had a great time. I've had such a good time with you guys. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming into the show. Can you pass me that real quick? Guys, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I want to this has been crazy. Longest show we've done yet. Thanks everyone, we appreciate it so much. And yeah, 220, crazy wow. Cool. This has been awesome. Human AI hybrid collaboration, super multifaceted. It's been a lot of fun, guys, talking about this. Building tools maximizing humanity's collective and individual capabilities, saving us vast amounts of cognitive labor and extending our memory in all areas of life. We'd love to hear from you all below. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let us know what your thoughts were on the episode, and go and build the future, everyone. Go and build these tools that we're talking about. Join us in our efforts as we go and we do things like move forward in making this hackathon happen, making these tool sets even better, and build your own dreams into the world, everyone. Much love. We greatly appreciate it. Yes.
And submit that list of ideas and problems.
Submit the list of ideas and problems. And that's it. Monty, Jacob, Jack, much love. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Greatly appreciate it. And we'll see you soon. Peace. Keep supporting artists and entrepreneurs that you believe in, your local areas. Make that happen, everyone.